across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yes, welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia. She's back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. 10 years on from the murder of Joe Cox. Warnings of death threats, mass abuse and poisoned political discourse are creating a huge divide in the way we engage in politics. But are there other reasons why there's such a wedge between political views? When did your opponent become your enemy? Well, look at that. And how has politics become so darn toxic? Thoughts on that coming up. Also this afternoon, the Prime Minister's social media ban has faced immediate pushback from the likes of Apple and Google. They oppose the government's preferred age verification approach over privacy concerns, whilst the announcement has been branded a rush job, and platforms warn that teenagers will simply migrate to unregulated alternatives. That's absolutely true, that last point. How do we regulate the unregulated? Details to come. And the man who killed Henry Novak has had his 21-year sentence referred to the Court of Appeal as unduly lenient. This, of course, was as body cam footage of the teenager's final moments continues to spark debate and protest. We'll bring you everything you need to know. There's always some breaking news right here on Afternoons. 0344 499 1000 is where you get in touch. You can leave a voice note there as well. And, of course, you can message 87222. So we start here. This was 10 years ago today.
Just before 1 o'clock today, Joe Cox, MP for Batley and Spenborough, was attacked in Market Street, Birstall. I am now very sad to have to report that she has died as a result of her injuries.
It was indeed truly shocking when that news came through, not least because this was a wife and a mother. But wider than that, this was a public representative, an elected politician, who had the audacity to have a different view to someone else. And that person took it to the most lethal levels. Her words were, "We've got far more in common than that which divides us." They're quoted often, but perhaps they feel less true today than they did when she said that. You might think it would be the other way round. The chronology would be, no, that would be a totemic point when we all sort of pulled together a bit. So why has Britain become more divided, more territorial, more angry, more toxic? Partly, perhaps, because increasingly we live in different realities. Social media has replaced the village square with thousands upon thousands of digital tribes, each convinced they possess the truth while everyone else is either stupid or evil. Outrage travels faster than understanding. Anger gets more clicks than compromise. And, of course, Joe Cox is not the only example of people taking things too far.
Mr. Annie, is this a terrorist attack?
I mean, I guess, yeah, I killed an MP and I done it. Yeah, okay.
That was the police interview after the death of David Amess, the Conservative MP. A terror attack. It's not just over here. Charlie Kirk assassinated in the United States because he had a different opinion to others. Even Donald Trump has had more than one attempt on his life. How did politics become this toxic? I mean, man alive, only saying this out loud, you begin to think, wow, I mean, this is a kind of strange era we're in. All this has all happened in the last 10 years. Of course, previous people would have taken things into their own hands, but just the examples I've given there all sit within the last decade. But there's something deeper going on here, I sense. For many people, politics is no longer about public services or tax rates, etc. It's become about identity, about immigration, Brexit, culture, gender, class, national pride. These are questions of who we are, not simply what we believe. When politics becomes identity, disagreement then feels really personal. A challenge to an opinion is like a challenge to your existence. 0344 499 1000. And add to all of that, of course, years of economic pressure, declining trust in institutions, stagnant living standards, and a growing sense that nobody is actually listening in places like Westminster, and frustration begins to harden into resentment, real resentment. Most people remain decent. Most people remain peaceful and tolerant. Yet when societies lose faith in their ability to solve problems, anger rushes to fill the vacuum. That may be the real reason of the last decade of what's happened since Joe Cox's death. And I mentioned only yesterday on the programme that there was a flood. We had a guest on the programme, Liam Deacon. He's a former Brexit Party press officer, now a Reform supporter. He was on the programme I think it was last Friday, probably. The clip of Liam on the show went onto Twitter, and the world lost its mind. I've never seen such liberal use of the F word, the C-bomb dropped, challenges on his family. Those that then argued in support of him were told they had no right to live, threats of sexual assault. I mean, this was all over a man with a different opinion. 0344 499 1000. Just answer me this. I mean, social media would be certainly a player in this discussion. How has politics become so toxic? What's your interpretation of what happened and what has happened? And we think of Joe Cox as being a kind of grim but totemic reminder of perhaps where things started to go wrong. Charlie Rowley has joined us in the studio, the political commentator, and of course more recently on the team sheet here at Talk as well. God knows how. Charlie is...
I'm asking myself that very question. I'm surprised I've been invited back. I'm here now.
I don't know how many emails I have to send, but still he keeps on coming. There it is. Always good to see you, Charlie. You've worked in politics. You've been there kind of, when I say at the top table, you've worked as an advisor, but to those at the top table. So you know what all this stuff feels like. Is this whole toxicity of the political conversation, is that sort of recognised in the corridors of Westminster?
I think it's recognised to an extent, but you're right when you say that we live in our different sort of worlds, you know, so there will be people from a particular background, political background, yes, predominantly on the left, who will have a view that all of the outrage is just conducted by maybe a small group of small-minded Little
Yes.
Englanders, rather than actually understanding. And it doesn't matter how many times, you know, they could be told through elections and at the ballot box, whether that was through Brexit, as you talked about earlier on, whether it's through the emergence of Reform as a party winning local elections. Yeah. You know, the message is becoming clearer by the day. So it depends how politicians then interpret that. But there's a whole list of things that you talked about. You know, you're absolutely right in the list that you read out, and it's hard to pinpoint where exactly things had gone wrong. But you could include things like, you know, the July bombings in 2007 and 2005.
Yeah, good point.
You could talk about the Manchester arena bombings. You could talk about the stabbing in Reading, the Westminster Bridge attack, the London Bridge attack. Yeah. All the crime that we're seeing in our newspapers, in the column inches, day in, day out. That is what is getting to the heart of people, where they feel that this country's lost control and it's lost direction, and it's screaming out for politicians, a political class, to deal with it. Yeah, and I wonder, you know, I mentioned social media, which has sort of provided the conch for literally everybody to have a view. Now, there's lots you can, you know, I'm sure, God knows how many dissertations have been written in the last 10 years on social media, and certainly in the last couple, on its effects or lack of effects, or its relevance, or its permanency, or whatever. But it really is some kind of place, isn't it? I mean, when you're sort of forced to wonder how real it is. Is this just most people, we should say, are not actively on social media. Most people will never see this stuff. You know, it gets passed around, it gets shared, it gets lots of likes and hits, and you're sort of forgiven for thinking that the entire world is behind this opinion or that opinion. But you could go out onto the streets and you won't find anybody who's heard of the person that has said it or anything like that. You know, this is just a we are the new media kind of thing. Not really, not certainly when you look at the accuracy or the lack of in terms of news, but it's divided people. So is it people who are just
were already angry with their life have found a sort of an avenue, a kind of valve through which they can get their anger, their annoyance, their frustrations out, and then they attach it to something. And is it all of that? I mean, this is psychiatry stuff.
No, you're absolutely right. There are some people out there who, I was about to say good people, but they're not good people. There are just people out there who are very good at tapping into, I think, people's fears, their worries, the extremes on both sides of the debate, left and right, but without providing a solution. But by the time that they've articulated the real problem and the headline and grabbed everybody's attention as to whether it's a crime that's taken place, a violent crime, whether it's, you know, the influx of migrants that are coming into our country, all things that people can be absolutely and rightly outraged about without providing a solution. And then, because things are, I hate to say it, you know, slightly more complicated than anything, you know, it is not as simple as saying stop the boats or smash the gangs. And again, that is the problem of the political class. They come up with these slogans and then fail to deliver. People get angry about that. And then politicians wonder why the people are angry about it, because you've given them something, you've told them that you're going to do something without any sort of meat on the bones, without any kind of explanation as to how you're going to do it. And then, of course, you don't see the delivery of it. And that's when people then get angry, and that's when you start to see tensions boil over. You know, these things don't happen overnight. What we saw in Southport a couple of years ago, what we've seen in Belfast, totally wrong to be protesting. Don't set your own community alight, for goodness sake. That's the worst thing you can do. But you know, people don't just flick a switch and think, right, today I'm going to go and protest. Or I'm going to get violent on my own streets. It's got to a point where people are simmering. They've been simmering for a long time, and now tensions have just boiled over.
When you, the man responsible for the murder of Joe Cox, who apparently shouted Britain first with, now whether that was Britain first as in there is a political organisation by that name, whether it's that or whether it's just a general term. Now, if you were to sit this person down, I don't imagine you'd get much solid discourse from this man. I don't imagine, you know, if you asked him about his, you know, inner views on the kind of inadequacies of taxation within a certain demographic, or I don't think he'd know the answers to that. I don't think he would be genned up. I don't think this was somebody you'd like to, I mean, I appreciate that, you know, people who carry out horrible crimes are not always thick. There are some very intelligent people who've done horrendous things, but it's a feeling, isn't it? I don't know, you know, to be that angry that you think I'm going to shoot and stab a member of Parliament in broad daylight while other people are around. I mean, where does that come from? Is that somebody who's so engaged in the political process that they've looked at everything and they've weighed up the pros and the cons and they've realised that there is a terrible thing going on here and I must be the person to stop it, even if it means killing someone? I don't think it's that thought out. I think it's idiocy mixed with heady levels of, you know, sheer toxicity and evilness, whatever words you want to use. I don't think it's somebody who is intellectually engaged in political discussion and conversation.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And, you know, there might be some, you know, delusions there or whatever, you know, why people come to the conclusion that they then are motivated to do the actions that they carry out. You're absolutely right. And look, that is, you know, you will have people who are on the far right that will go and attack people, as was that case. But there are people on the, I mean, to call it left and right, but on the far left, the people who are radical extremists. And
well, you think of the death of Charlie Kirk, you know, who was assassinated, again, broad daylight, his family literally sitting in the audience when this happened, because somebody had a different political opinion to him.
And I think you're absolutely
How
right.
engaged were they? So this is the sort of the left version, you know. Again, I think these are not people. I think if you sat down the shooter and said, come on, let's have this out, let's talk about the American system and where everything's gone horribly wrong, I don't think they'd have a clue.
No, but the irony is that's what Charlie Kirk sort of was all about, you know, sitting there just, you know, in a chair with a tent over him to say, come and have a conversation. You know, we might disagree politically, we might disagree on lots of things, but I think that there is a scary element of, I should say, people who I think are indoctrinated with a particular set of views that they might have found online, that social media might have told them, you must sign up to this bandwagon, you must sign up to that bandwagon, you must be pro-trans, you must be pro-Palestine, you must be pro-whatever bandwagon is going. And then, of course, once you sort of maybe find your own path and realise, actually, oh, you know, I might not agree with that. And then you become slightly confused, and then you become sort of slightly isolated, and then you take matters into your own hands. It can be a bit of a downward spiral. But, you know, you've only got to look at the PREVENT strategy in the UK, you know, the PREVENT programme, which is there to try and stop and identify people who might be problematic and go on to commit acts of terrorism, whether it's on the right and the left, whether it's far-right extremism. But we do see, and this is why I think the public are becoming particularly increasingly angry in the UK, because there is a more of a threat. These aren't my words. These are a threat from the PREVENT of, you know, a radical extremism. Islamist extremism ideology in this country that has committed far more attacks in this country than those on the far right. Or far-right politics, if you take that particular view. And that's where I think people are now sort of starting to get fed up. When you see lots of people come in those small boats that now might pose a threat, when we've got that threat in the first place, it's that idea of fairness and balance that I think the British public, more often than not, are getting more angry about. And that could be a reason why they voted Brexit. That could be a reason why you're seeing the emergence of other parties on the right, whether it's Reform, whether it's Restore, people are talking about. And that's why you're seeing, I think, a retraction from people that might have been once happy to jump on every bandwagon and every sort of idea of progress going, and now we're not seeing that.
But are they're kind of sort of, some of these things are single-issue things, because if you said to somebody, right, here's a party, it's a new sort of left-wing party, the Green Party, or you looked at Restore on the right, etc., and said, OK, tell us, just run over their agricultural policy. And I think most would go, what? I don't have no idea. Right, OK, what about then in their education policy? Maybe that's a little easier to digest. I don't know. So it's just that one bit that really gets you. So on the left, it's the bit where you're going to tax rich people out of their pants in order to save the planet. You like that bit, but you don't know anything else about green policies. On the other side, I love the deportation idea, but beyond that, no idea what their defence policy is. So there's all of that. I'm looking at people like, have you heard of Marina Purkiss?
I have, yes.
You have? Have you ever done a TV thing with...
I have, yes.
Have you?
Yes,
really?
yes.
I didn't ask. It's not a trick question,
No,
Charlie.
no,
It's not about to walk in the room.
No, hello.
Well, here she is.
Marina.
So...
I'd like to hear where you're going with that story, but what I was going to say is, when you talked about the media also have a responsibility to not pit, I think, people against each other who are just of the extremes either side, just to create those clicks, to create those viewers. If that's what people are looking for, then I'm afraid that's sometimes not really me, because, you know, I like to be able to, having had a background in politics, as you very kindly advertised my CV, you know, like to be able to bring solutions
I wouldn't even mention it, frankly, Charlie, but, you know, I thought I would. But,
it's all my fault.
Well, the reason I mentioned Purkiss is because there's a sort of great example, you know, of a, you know, in my own view, sort of left-wing half-wit, gobs a lot, speaks a lot, doesn't really say anything of any real substance, nothing you'd go, wow, she's good, unless you're also a left-wing half-wit. Then you would listen to her and go, she's amazing. Now, I was just looking under my investigation into this subject at some of the things that she's tweeted. I mean, this is a person that, it seems like a perfectly, I'm sure if you sat down and had a glass of Pinot Grigio with her, she's a perfectly amicable person. Maybe you've done that as well, Charlie, I don't know.
No, we haven't had a wine. We've had a small talk in the green room, and that's probably about as far as it goes.
Small talk in the green room, yeah, or a small talk. But I know, the reason I mentioned Jo Cox is because she mentions in fact, she retweets, or reposts, as it's called now, Brendan Cox, the husband of Jo Cox, about it being 10 years. Now, she would never retweet 10 years after Charlie Kirk was killed. She would probably not even retweet the same for a politician of a different flavour, or she might tenuously do. I don't know. I'm not trying to malign her personally. I just completely disagree with her views, and I find her views to be so overtly forthright, but the scaffolding of her arguments collapses on first glimpse, frankly, let alone challenge. But she wouldn't do that, so she's attached to this left-wing thing she can't get out of. She's like someone's put her in a left-wing sack and said, right, you're in there for good. Whatever you do, stick within that, so don't go anywhere else, don't start understanding people. And then on the other side, you'd look at somebody like Tommy Robinson, I suppose. So she's got 500,000 followers. He's got like 2 million or something. These are people with big numbers. And then, of course, people then repost and share what they've said. 1.4 million, 284,000, another one 15 million. I mean, goodness me, the list goes on. So that you get big numbers on these things by being at the extreme ends. But How did it get to that? How did it get that you've got to be that extreme in order to gain any kind of traction? And does that traction take us anywhere other than into a more toxic place politically?
I'm afraid it doesn't, because it's an end to nowhere, really, because you can be popular and have a particular populist view for a period of time, but everything is cyclical. You know, at the end of the day, people still, you know, when any politician goes knocking on your door, or whether it's a local one or any other for that matter, they still want to know about how you're going to deal with my kid's school or have better or outstanding schools.
When it comes
what are you going to do with the NHS? What are you going to do with the economy? What are you going to do about immigration?
Okay.
But you're absolutely right. I think you can be a campaigner, and I would say Marina is a campaigner on a particular left side of it. But politics is better when you can agree on things, or where you can find compromise rather than the division, which some of these people seek to do.
We've already done one subject.
Sorry.
We've got another 27 to go. We've only got 7 minutes. We're going to have Charlie Rowley is with us. We're going to have a quick pause. We're back in a couple of moments. How has politics become this toxic? What is your thinking behind it? Where does it go? Is there likely to be any... is this just a period we're going through, like the Ice Age? This is the toxic age. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
I'm genuinely disgusted when people continue to point out failure after failure after failure and do not provide balanced analysis of the deliverable of services like the police. What I don't see from reform is them standing next to some of these people that they continually criticise and saying, actually, they've made a mistake here. There is a requirement for a review and we must get through it. But I'd also like to thank the police for doing an excellent job at stopping the riots, doing this, breaking this criminal gang, doing the hard work they do day in, day out. And I think we take it for granted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. 25 past 1. Charlie Rowley is still with us. Yep. We've got lots to get through. There's other stories out there. We are going to continue, of course, to take your calls.
There are other people out there.
There's other people out there. I know. I'm sorry to do this to you, everybody, but he's staying for at least. He's got another 5 minutes in him, this man. Keir Starmer's social media ban, of course, for under-16s. It's been branded a bit of a rush job by some critics, claiming the Prime Minister is desperately trying to secure a legacy policy because he expects to be forced from Downing Street, which could be like this time next week. Could almost be gone. But here's the announcement that he made yesterday.
Today, I can announce that the government will ban access to social media for all children under the age of 16.
Today, he announced...
It's uncanny.
Today. What is that? It's just awful. It's just an awful way to start your... It's like he's gone full... Today. He's gone full on that one.
Yes.
I can't stop saying it. I want to say it again. No, I won't. Might do it later. Should we do it? Well, I'll do it 17 minutes past 3, maybe. So the ban, all right, we understand the issues around it. We know that, you know, kids seeing horrendous stuff like beheadings and sex and God knows what sex. I said that very Partridge-like, wasn't it? He goes, they're seeing sex. They're sex people then. But all of that, you know, it's not really for under 16. This is adult content, mostly. So why are kids on it? Because we're not... That's when you're talking about Twitter, for example. Most kids are not on Twitter. Most kids would contend there are exceptions, that things like Snapchat or for most, I think it's fair to say it's more of a messaging thing than it is anything else. Would that be fair, Finn? That messaging is probably up there more so than, I mean, if you're on TikTok, you're on there to watch some cack being delivered to you, spoon-fed every 3 seconds, where they can literally in the last 10 seconds work out, you've watched this for this long, it's got this in it, so here's another one of a similar nature. So it's all very clever stuff. So there's lots of different reasons. Sometimes it's about inappropriate content, sometimes it's about really the addiction of doom scrolling and things like that. But the government have been accused of going too fast, even though this was the government, of course, that said we're not going to go this direction.
And look, you know, in Australia they tried to bring it in, and then it's not worked out because kids have been able to find an alternative and they've got round the ban. So will that happen in the UK? Most probably. I think the approach should be, because I don't want to cancel things, and we can't put the genie back in the bottle. So I think the onus is on the social media companies to remove whatever content is up there in the first place. And there must be a way in 2026, if you've got all this technology, there must be a way of through AI, being able to work out, well, hold on, if that looks like a knife, for example, that's appearing on a video, well, that shouldn't be able to be uploaded in the first place.
Yeah.
You know, there must be that technology available, because I think, you know, kids will get around it. It's the algorithms, as you said. I think these are the problems, the algorithms, because as soon as you see one video of something, it then the device basically then thinks that you're interested in all of that kind of content, and that's what it would just keep throwing your way. Well, I don't want to see that. You know, I think that for me is a problem. Dare I say it, with X. I don't want to see my fellow centre-right commentator. I want to see sometimes what other people are saying, because that allows me to inform my view perfectly well. I'm perfectly.
I don't want to see any opposing view to the one I have, Charlie. I just want to see stuff that feeds me. But that is the problem, isn't it? It comes back to our first subject in that respect. But then there's the sort of the content thing. You know, I say this all the time, I can sit on the train going home, scroll through Twitter, I can see, you know, a barbaric torture video from the mountains of Iraq, I can see some, you know, horrendous sort of sex assault, I can see, you can see pornography, you can see all of this stuff. This is daytime, just on your telephone in a public place, you know. It's amazing when you sit on a train, you can see between the two seats what somebody's looking at once in a while. You think, you know, I do feel sorry for somebody, because they're not, you know, they might be sitting there thinking they're watching, I don't know, you know, some kind of documentary or something. Talk Breakfast. They're watching Jeremy Kyle and suddenly a boob comes up. You know?
Well, that's just me when I appear.
Sorry, that's when you appear.
That's my regular slot.
Round is on again. Oh, no, it's not. It's pornography. It's an easy kind of mistake. But it's that kind of random nature of it. Now, I think the kind of Musk, certainly Musk, but one has to reasonably assume Zuckerberg as well, and others. I think where they're at on this is that the American Constitution doesn't, you know, it's free speech. If you don't want to see it, don't look at it. That's the way it works. You can't tell us, the government can't tell us what we can and cannot put out. Now, bearing in mind that the American system is so censorious when it comes to things like sex in movies and outrage. You know, when we used to have Page 3 in The Sun, Americans could not quite believe that a national newspaper, you can open it up, first page, not even buried on page 36. Literally, the first page you open up is a naked woman. And, of course, we don't have that anymore. It was of its time, had a huge success. It was all part of, you know, the whole spirit in a curious way. A bit Seaside Postcardy-ish in that respect, a bit Benidorm, you know, in that sort of sense. So it had that element to it. But Americans could never work that out. Now, they've always been quite cool with violence in film. You can blow somebody's head off as much as you like, but if you start showing the odd boobette in some kind of, like, film or in anything before the watershed, they lose their mind, the kind of Christian position. But I sort of take that position on social media a little bit. I think my sort of ethical radar is fairly sort of ecclesiastically informed in this sense.
No, I think you're
I'm not trying to be pompous about it. I just don't want to see shizzle like that all over the place.
No, I think I think most people probably don't either. But I think when it comes to kids, I think there has to be...
I said this to you like in confession, didn't I?
Yes, yeah,
so that's my... Do I get absolution, Charlie?
Well, I'll think about it. But for kids, it's really important. I think there's so many elements to it. I think look, whether you have a screen time lock. So after you've seen your screen for however many hours, then the device sort of shuts down. Or whether it's a way in which parents have a better and schools have a better understanding of social media. Because I still think, you know, what was when I was growing up, you know, we still had a, you know, back in my day, you know, we still had a, we had a computer. And the first thing that sort of came on was, I think it was MSN Messenger. Now, these were sort of chat rooms on a computer. That was the first sort of its kind, which would have, you know, could have opened up to all kinds of things. And nowadays, it's 50-odd apps that you could have, whether it's Snapchat, whether it's X, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, many others are available. But it's about having, I think, parents should have a conversation with their kids about knowing what their kids are on, whether they're... again, it comes back to the online companies to prevent the content being uploaded in the first place and quickly and swiftly removed. And if it's been found on your device, maybe there's a way of then shutting that down. But I don't know. But there is other technology, I think, out there, rather than just rushing to a ban, where actually then you have kids not being able to maybe use YouTube or whether it is getting their news from Instagram, because most people get their news from these social media companies now.
I was just going to finish by looking at my own Twitter feed and just to see what randomly came up. And the very first thing at the top, I actually saw this earlier, but this is an update, is the Michael Gove cycling incident. Have you seen this?
I have seen it, yes. I haven't...
So I really mentioned this because you're former boss, of course.
Well, I was riding the bike.
You were on It's Rowley on two wheels. This is where a cyclist kind of nearly knocks into Michael Gove and shouts, you know, you shouldn't have crossed the road. Actually, the cyclist shouldn't have turned the corner because it was a no left turn. And even if you are allowed to turn the corner, the highway code says you should have been mindful of pedestrians.
Absolutely.
Michael has now replied and says, as a cyclist myself, can I apologise on behalf of the community for this unmannerly individual? Unmannerly? Is that the right word?
I'm not...
It's Gove making up words again.
Yes, yeah. Well, he would know. He's a bright man.
Well, the guy tweeted originally, Michael Gove has just wandered out in front of my bike against a red light. What a remarkable commitment to proving Ian Duncan Smith wrong. Turns out the biggest menace to cyclists is middle-aged politicians ignoring the highway code. But this nutjob had actually ignored it himself. And it was just a little moment when Mr. Gove is crossing the road.
But it's a small thing, but it's got us talking. You know, it is, you know,
it's got us all talking.
Cyclists versus pedestrians.
But if you're laid in bed seeing that kind of stuff, you can see why I'd scroll through that, go, is there another similar kind of thing that is going to get me? Is it for the government to ban me from looking at it?
Totally. Another cyclist, another rope, because I would take that view, and that would get me quite excised being in London. You see them all the time.
Indeed. Well, you come to work on a unicycle, which is really something special. Charlie.
My penny farthing.
Vine has one of those, literally. Charlie, thank you. Charlie Rowley with us here on Talk. Over to you. Let's go back to that. Well, on all of these issues, social media, toxicity. How has politics become so toxic? Lines are open. This is Talk. Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk. Nicholas Nix in Winchester says, Ian, please do not play clips of Starmer at lunchtime. This will put us off our meals. Thank you, says Nick. It's a very reasonable. I apologise. I might even refer myself to Ofcom as a result of that. Today, maybe we'll come back to that clip after people have eaten. We are, of course, talking... But how has politics become so toxic? Let's speak with Tom Brake, former Lib Dem MP, Director of Unlock Democracy. Tom, afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Nice to have you with us and good to see you again. I mean, we were talking here about some of the horrors that we've seen on our streets. 10 years today, of course, Joe Cox was murdered. David Amos has been murdered in the States. Charlie Kirk, for his political views, was murdered. Even the president, a couple of attempts on his life. Now, of course, political assassinations, I'm sorry to sound so casual about this, they're not entirely new, but we do seem to be in a bit of a place where views are sort of, they've risen to these curious levels of unacceptability of other people's opinions. We've never quite been in this place as far as I can see.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to say that my heart is with Joe Cox's family on the occasion of the 10th anniversary, and indeed with David Amos's family nearly 5 years after he was murdered. You're right that we are, I think, in a really challenging time for politicians. Now, I guess if you went back to the 80s when the IRA were active, then there were a couple of politicians, sadly members of parliament, who were killed within the space of just 3 years. But I think we are now 40 years on in a really challenging place. And I think what the difference is now is that very often the antagonism towards politicians of any party is driven to a great extent by online activity, where perhaps sort of low-level abuse can sort of escalate, generate, sort of snowball, and then perhaps lead some individuals to go beyond what some might deem normal political criticism to something much, much more worrying than that.
And even those that would, I'm sure, never consider doing anything physical. You look at social media, the way that people engage. I mean, it makes you look at the House of Commons, and when the House of Commons, as you know well, Tom, when it's when it's up and running brilliantly. In fact, the House of Lords is often still quite a good example of where you can get great debates and a very gentlemanly vibe to it. The honourable gentleman this and the right honourable gentleman that. I mean, it all sounds to to some people all a little bit old-fashioned and archaic, but there is a sort of an underbelly of decency in how that system of polite disagreement works. It's that polite disagreement that's sort of gone out the window a bit, isn't it? I mean, if I, for example, say anything bad against... If I said I didn't like Donald Trump, in fact, I wouldn't even have to say that, Tom. If I said there's 4 things I do like about Donald Trump, but 1 thing I don't, that would be enough for me to be written off as a woke, lefty, retarded, God knows what else person who should probably have his life ended and his house set on fire. I mean, how did we get to... It would normally be satire in any other era of life, but that's sort of where we're at. We don't have opponents, we have enemies.
Yes, and I think I don't want to talk always about social media, but I think the fact is that perhaps when I was first elected in 1997, if people wanted to come and criticise me, attack me for my views, then they'd have to take the trouble of perhaps coming to a surgery, or they could write a letter. Nowadays, it is done within the flash of an eye on social media, and the throwaway comments that people make on social media about threatening to kill their members of parliament. And there was a speakers conference survey of MPs which found that a quarter of MPs had people make death threats against them. People don't sort of understand the consequences of that. That threat, issued perhaps after a couple of pints late at night, I mean, not just affects the member of parliament, who often actually won't be at home. The member of parliament is likely to be in parliament, and it will be their family who will be at home. So people need to understand that there are consequences of these, what might be an amusing threat or an amusing jibe, but actually has consequences.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I suppose, another level of, as you rightly say, it's not just about social media, but you could find yourself as a member of parliament voting on a certain bill or just an amendment or something that some would see as controversial. You come out your office, someone's there with a phone, filming you, following you down the street. That goes viral before you realise it. 15,000 people have piled in. Your life is absolutely worthless because you dared to have a different opinion. We're in that sort of place as well. Life is, every scintilla of life, it seems, is streamed in real time.
Yes, and that survey I mentioned, the Speakers' Conference survey, also found that a quarter of MPs had been followed or filmed, and that clearly is very intimidating.
Yeah.
And what it means is that we'll end up with members of parliament who will only travel around in armoured cars, won't ever meet any of their constituents. And that, I think, is very bad for democracy. And of course, that is already happening in that members of parliament, again, when I was first elected, it was I would hold a surgery literally in the middle of nowhere by myself.
Yeah.
On a Friday night. Nowadays, a member of parliament couldn't possibly do that because the risk is too great. And if they hold a public event in the high street, which is a planned, advertised public event, I understand very often they'll have perhaps a plainclothes police officer with them.
I always think of, there's very few areas of life, Tom, where I would support Sadiq Khan, but that's just a political difference of opinion. But I do find it interesting that, the Mayor of London has to be driven around in an armoured vehicle with armed officers with him. The previous Mayor, Boris Johnson, used to go to work on a bike. The one before that, Ken Livingstone, used to go to work on a tube. That gives you an example of how things have shifted.
It does. And I mean, clearly there are things that can be done, and security for MPs and other politicians has been enhanced. I think there is a responsibility for the political parties, and we've had some examples recently of a political party that chose to edit a quote from another party leader in a way that meant that it appeared that that person was saying the complete opposite of what they had said, leading to what appeared to be a really inflammatory comment. Well, political parties shouldn't be in the business of doing that and fueling the anger that there is. There's already enough anger without it being fueled by political parties.
And that's fair. Tom, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate that. Tom Brake, former Lib Dem MP, now Director of Unlock Democracy. I thought he made some really good points in that as well. When it comes to being at the coalface as an MP, I mean, it happens to journalists, but as an MP, when you're followed down the street, you get these characters called auditors and stuff like that generally wouldn't just be following an individual, but kind of those sort of citizen journalists, that's the one, that will go out and, Mr. Brake, why did you vote for this? What do you say to your constituents? What do you say to Madge Smithers, whose husband is no longer alive, and it's all because you voted in this way? And really kind of doorstepping in the most miserable, grisly, often dangerous kind of way. And then it doesn't stop there, of course. This isn't something that someone's just lobbed on their website, which it might have been 10 years ago, because it will go onto socials now, and once it's on there, you've got this big pile-in, and then you have threats to the... it's just this mess, this cacophony of absolute mess, whether it's coming from the streets, whether it's politicians, whether it's social media, whether it's in the pub. I mean, I don't know whether landlords, has anybody surveyed landlords to find out whether, because they used to say never talk about religion and politics when you're having a drink, but of course you end up often talking about those two things. Have there been more people kicking off in pubs in the last 10 years, or do people still keep it fairly civil when they're there? Let's speak with Kevin Schofield, political editor at HuffPost UK. Afternoon to you, Kevin. I mean, you've been around the journalistic block for a long, long time, so you've seen the conversations change. And I think it would be fair to say, I don't think there's anything, any hyperbole in this, that we've never really lived in such a toxic time when it comes to the political conversation.
Oh, absolutely. You're right there, Ian. I thought Tom made a lot of good points there. And social media undoubtedly has a huge role to play in that. I remember that sad day when Joe Cox was murdered. But in the 10 years since, I think, if anything, the atmosphere, the political toxicity has got exponentially worse, really. And I think social media is the main driver behind it. There are no more shades of grey in politics anymore. You're either on one side or the other. There's no attempt oftentimes to sort of seek out common ground, because it doesn't drive engagement on social media. People get likes, they get retweets from taking extreme positions and not from giving ground on anything to their political opponents.
Yeah. Do you think politicians play to this a little bit as well? I've always thought the Conservatives are kind of in a pretty difficult place now, because a lot of the kind of harder elements of of their party have split off into now other parties. So it's left them looking like a very, very kind of bog standard middle ground party, and therefore to some they've got nothing to say. That may well be written up in years to come as a party that literally died because they didn't follow the extremes and the trends of social media.
Perhaps, and you know, not just the Conservatives. I think Labour have got that issue as well. They've been
100%. Yeah.
By the Greens. You see Zach Polanski, you know, takes very extreme left-wing positions, and then you know, he accuses Labour of selling out. And then when Labour tried to tack a little bit to the left, then they're getting hammered by reform. And a lot of obviously former Labour voters back reform, so they're either neither one thing nor the other. Now, in the past, as you know yourself, Ian, it tended to be that elections were won from the centre ground. You know, not tacking wildly to the left or to the right. That may well be breaking down now. We've yet to see this. I mean, obviously, Keir Starmer won on a fairly centrist agenda. Were Reform to win the next election, then I think that would show that old way of thinking has gone. We're still a long way out from a general election right enough, so I just have to wait and see. But certainly as far as social media engagement is concerned, the way to be heard is to be loud and to take a very extreme position, and that I think is part of the reason why Labour and the Conservatives are really struggling right now.
Yeah. Is this likely to be an era we're going through? Is there going to be, when we look back in 20 years' time, you know, when you and I are playing bingo in Blackpool or something of that nature, Kevin, and long retired, and somebody else has to clip our toenails, you know, the usual drill. When we're in that place, will we look back and go, do you remember that era when everybody just lost their minds and got really horrible to each other? Or is this here for good?
Well, I wouldn't want to predict that it definitely will go. I mean, it tends to be that things come in cycles, and it may well be that, you know, in 20 years' time, you're right, things may return. Maybe before then, things may return to a shall we say, a gentler age. But it's so difficult to predict because, you know, what's going to come after social media? What will be the next big trend online? Because clearly the internet isn't going anywhere. So it's so difficult to tell now. Politics is moving at such a breakneck speed. You know, it used to be 24/7 news was the thing that was driving politics. Now it's social media, and things change in the blink of an eye. It's all about video content. It's all about, you know, snappy political announcements rather than detailed, boring things that actually get things done. People don't seem to have the patience for that anymore. So who's to say that we might end up maybe back where we started, but I wouldn't like to predict that that's definitely what's going to happen.
Indeed, yeah, it could take a long time if it is going to happen. Kevin, thank you. Kevin Schofield is the political editor of HuffPost UK. I think this is such a fascinating area or an era of our times, and if you've got young kids and they're growing up in, you know, what's it going to look like to them when they start to get a little more engaged? Will they only be engaged because of what they see on social media? So we start to so your starting point becomes the extremes, not something you drift into, which I think you could reasonably say has sort of happened over the years. You look at an obvious thing like immigration, and people understandably looked at the Tories and went, well, they've done naff all about immigration. That's a fact. Income Labour, they've done naff all about immigration. That's also a fact. So my money's over there. I don't know what their education policy is, their defence policy. I don't know whatever these new parties, but that's where I'm going to go to because I feel they're representing me on something I feel strongly about. So that was an organic process that many people listening to this would recognise. But yeah, if you're 15 now, 14, 15, you're starting to look maybe at some areas of politics, and you do so through the prism of social media while you can, then that's interesting because that's your starting point now. Your starting point is the edges, not the middle, not the centre. 0344 499 1000. It goes beyond social media. This is not just about social media, this discussion. It's about the wider issue of politics and the idea that your opponent, somebody who just had a different view to you, is now an enemy. How did we get there? How did politics become so toxic? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
I'm genuinely disgusted when people continue to point out failure after failure after failure and do not provide balanced analysis of the deliverable of services like the police. What I don't see from reform is them standing next to some of these people that they continually criticise and saying, actually, they've made a mistake here. There is a requirement for a review and we must get through it. But I'd also like to thank the police for doing an excellent job at stopping the riots, doing this, breaking this criminal gang, doing the hard work they do day in, day out. And I think we take it for granted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
David Dorset says if parliamentarians did a decent job, they would be appreciated. Answering emails would be a good start. Yeah, not a bad call. Clayton in Dartford. Surely politicians themselves must bear some responsibility, especially on the left. Remember, people who voted Brexit are worse than Nazis. Didn't go too well, that one, did it? Says Clayton. Yeah, there was that, wasn't there? When you take it there, because this isn't really an argument that the right are toxic, because you see it so much from the left, and you look at some of the accounts that I was just referring to, and that was just the obvious one when I talked about Perkins. I mean, there's another one out there that is so darn grim. It's beyond left. I've never met anybody who could be that left wing. I mean, it's utterly crazy. If someone was having an equivalence on the right, they would be probably kicked off Twitter even by Elon Musk's standards. Let's go to Helen in Leicestershire. Helen, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Great show as always.
Thank you.
I've just been listening to your discussion, specifically with Charlie Rowley. I've certainly read a little around this subject. So this idea is not entirely mine, but it's partly also observation. I think the idea, the things that people used to belong to in society were sort of church, family, neighbourhood, school. I think those things have weakened. I don't think they've gone complete, but they've weakened. So people are looking for groups with which to identify. But I think because the modern world is such a threatening place, those groups have literally, belonging to them, become a matter of life and death in the heads of the people that belong to them.
Yeah.
So the only way that you can enforce the mores of your group is to kill the people in the other group. So I think we need to look more deeply at why, the world has fractured so much.
You've made a really good point, but I mean, how do we get out of this? Because it sort of senses, because you're right, you're absolutely right. There was a sense of I don't know, a kind of sense of belonging, as you mentioned, whether it was family, whether it was church, whatever it happened to be. And, we can argue that there were some problems with, don't ask any questions, don't get above your station. There was a little bit of that maybe in that, in the world today, that wouldn't be right to say to somebody you're not entitled to an opinion. So we all have opinions, but lots of people have lots of very unqualified opinions and often very inaccurate ones as well. Now, that, I suppose social media would be the reason we can see those opinions now, whereas before we couldn't. But we also see it sometimes in action with protests and the like.
Yes, and I mean, some of my views, some of the people I used to know have turned against me and called me a Nazi, literally, and sort of almost poked me in the chest.
Why would you be a Nazi? You're Helen in Leicestershire. You're the...
I am Helen in
Gorbals in Leicestershire. I mean, what could you have done? What could you have done or said, Helen, to be accused of that?
Yes, well, we won't go into that perhaps now, but I think we, it does sort of raise a fairly fundamental question, well, it certainly does to me, as to why, why these things have disappeared. I mean, social media is obviously part of it. I don't think that was the original sort of driving force. I think it's the collapse of these other things, or at least the weakening. I don't want to be apocalyptic about it.
No, the weakening is a good word.
I think it's almost Darwinian. People are saying, right, I have to belong to this group in order to survive. And in order to survive, I have to get rid of my rivals. And if you look at, as you've already described, Ian, this afternoon, people wanting to kill, they're threatening to kill. And that's the point. They want to take out the opposition in an unbelievable way, almost like they're at war with them. I mean, it's
that really, isn't it? And it's the idea, as I said a second ago, that you only have to. I get it all the time. Every presenter gets it when you say one bad thing about somebody that they like, and that's it. You're dead in the water. You get it. You're woke lefty. You should be working on LBC at 10 a.m. or something. Just because you happen to not like one thing Donald Trump said. I mean, it's bizarre, but that's where we've arrived at. And that's the harmless stuff, frankly. I mean, that's water off the duck's back territory.
Yeah, it's tribal. It's very primitive.
Tribal is the word.
And survival comes into it, and therefore I think the question to ask. I don't know the answer, mind you. What has happened to human beings that they're feeling so under?
That is the question.
Threat.
Indeed, that is the question as well. What has happened to humans, not necessarily everything else around us? Helen, you've been fantastic. Great first call. Thank you for that, Helen in Leicestershire. Right now, the time is 2 o'clock. Let's get the latest news headlines.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And good afternoon. Yeah, welcome back. Home of Common Sense. Loads to get through here. We are talking 10 years on after the murder of Joe Cox. Warnings of death threats, mass abuse and poisoned political discourse are creating a huge divide in the way we just simply chat, discuss and engage in politics. But are there other reasons why there's such a wedge between political views? When did your opponent become your mortal enemy? Details on that. How has politics become so toxic? Lines are open. Also, the Prime Minister's social media ban has faced immediate pushback from the likes of Apple and Google, opposing the government's preferred age verification approach over privacy concerns. Whilst the announcement has been branded a rush job and platforms warn teenagers will simply migrate to other unregulated alternatives. I tell you now, as sure as night follows day, that is true. And the man who killed Henry Novak has had his 21-year sentence referred to the Court of Appeal as unduly lenient. We know what happened from the body-worn footage of the teenager's final moments, which continues to spark anger and debate, and rightly so. Let's hope it's a full-on life sentence. Spoiler alert, it probably won't be. 0344 499 1000. If the man found guilty of the murder of the little boy that he'd adopted and his partner, was it even murder, or was it responsibility of killing, which is often the rather unfortunate distinction that happens in these kind of cases, where you're responsible for somebody's death, but you aren't actually found guilty of murder. If you're in that ballpark, then you get a lighter sentence, because the law of the land says, well, that's the offence you committed. The details of that case are so... I always said I wouldn't do this. I always said that before I had kids, I used to get slightly annoyed with people who go, oh, I don't want to hear that detail. I've got kids myself. I don't want to read that. And I always thought, well, yeah, sometimes you have to read some difficult stuff, particularly as a journalist. Do you know, this particular story, it follows a long line of very sad, distressing, I mean, absolutely beyond horror movie stuff. I mean, it's just horrific. I haven't read the details, the finer details. I'm aware of all the headlines. I'm aware of sort of the basics of, you know, what these horrible, evil, satanic, whatever words you want to use. They're not even people, creatures, animals, whatever you want to call it. I'm aware of what they did, but the finer details of it, I can't bring myself to read. It's just too close to home, isn't it, when you've got young kids, to want to read about chronic, daily abuse of a little one. And those are the kind of cases where you think, well, surely, you know, if ever somebody was going to go to prison for the entirety of their life, that's got to be it. But surprisingly, and this isn't just about it's not about the ineptitude of judges, it's about if it's the argument you want to have, it's about the ineptitude of the system. Judges can only sentence somebody based on the specific crime they've committed and what the legislation says for that crime. They can't say, well, I happen to think you were right wrong and here's an extra 10 years. It doesn't work like that. We understand why it doesn't work like that, but we also understand why sometimes we just wish it did. More on that throughout the course of the show. 0344 499 1000. So let's go back to it then. Keir Starmer's social media ban for under-16s. It's been branded a rush job. Even those that were broadly in favour of something have said this is too quick. Critics claim the Prime Minister is desperately trying to secure a bit of a legacy policy because he expects to be forced out of Downing Street, which could be. I mean, that process could literally begin this coming weekend. The process could begin this coming weekend. Let's have a listen then. Sorry to do this to you today. Here he is making that announcement.
Today, I can announce that the government will ban access to social media for all children under the age of 16.
Today, yes, there he is. That's what he said. How does that play with you? Andrew Tettenborn is a writer and academic. Andrew, nice to see you again. Good to have you with us. I think the business about it being a legacy policy, I think there's probably something in that. If you thought you had half an hour left in the job, you might want to go out with a bit of a bang. And this is perhaps what he's doing. And interestingly, of course, him and his government did oppose this ban on more than one occasion.
Well, yeah, I think there is an element of hogging the headlines here. Undoubtedly, this was rushed out pretty fast. It was rushed out with at least one eye on Makerfield and rushed out with an idea of saying the government is doing something. Having said that, and I can see why they're producing this policy, I see where parents are coming from. You know, there is some very nasty stuff out there indeed, and if my children were still of that age, I'd be worried about it. I still have a worry that this particular ban amounts to a cure that might very well be worse than the disease. And I think there are reasons for saying that, quite apart from the fact that Apple and Google don't like it. They wouldn't, of course. But I think there are actually rather good reasons for being a little bit cautious here.
I think I get the sense, Andrew, that if you ask somebody, do you think young people should see thoroughly rotten, horrific stuff online? I think we all say, well, no, we'd rather they didn't. If we also ask the question about kids sitting up all night, just scrolling through their phone, watching endless inane videos of absolutely nothing of any significance, even if it's not particularly violent or harrowing, just the mere idea of doing that, we all agree that also is a problem. So I think that point has general agreement. It's the implementation of how you do it that seems to be at stake here.
I think it is. I think there are 2 points to make. One is that there are likely to be rather awful unintended consequences here. One is this. There's a limit to the platforms, the sites, where we have any control at all. Now, one result will be to switch children from, say, X to some of the seriously dark corners of the internet. And for that matter, to switch them from, well, they might have snuck on to something like Pornhub. You know, there is a tendency to switch them to, I don't know, your very wonderful, awful Russian porn instead, which I think is something that very much worries me. There's another slightly more technical one. To get over this, to get round this ban, what you may have is large numbers of young people going on to, for example, free VPNs.
Yeah.
Now, they are very dangerous places to be indeed. If the VPN is free, you are the product. It is your information which is going to go out on the light and the dark web. And I don't think that's something we should be encouraging children to do.
We are left then, Andrew, with what? The irredeemable reality that we've just got to lump it, bad stuff is here to stay, just police it yourself. Is that the answer?
There are things we can do. There's one idea which I must admit my own son suggested, but I think he's absolutely right, which is much less drastic, but would at least do something towards it. You could, for example, require that every router, phone, tablet or laptop sold in this country contain parental control software switched on by default. Now, if you think about it, that actually would do a fair amount of good, because it could only be switched off by the owner, which will be the parents, because children don't normally have the money to buy themselves elegant smartphones and so on.
Yeah.
And it would be on by default. It would then be up to parents to say whether it should be switched off or not. And of course, when it comes to phones, you know, parents are always going to buy them.
Sure.
When it comes to routers, sorry to be very technical to anyone listening to this, but the router is what controls what comes into the house, and you can get parental controls for routers if they were always supplied with those switched on.
Yeah.
That would do a great deal of good.
It may well end up, perhaps, in that place where, you know, this policy is obviously not set in stone. It's got to go through the parliamentary system and all that goes with it. It may well end up, Andrew, with those kind of elements and facets added into it, because what does seem to be acknowledged by quite a lot of people in the know now, is that this is probably not that workable. We look at the Australian example where kids have found their way around it. So
50% of kids have found their way around.
Indeed, which is quite a lot of kids. I mean, that's a quite large, and it's not like 5%. It's significant.
Yeah.
Listen, Andrew, great to have you with us. Thank you for your time. Andrew Tettenborn, writer and academic, with us on the programme. I don't know whether he lost our line there or he had nothing to say on that last point. It could be that. He's right, though, what he said about it. The very simple toggle of turning something off would be the easiest thing. It would solve every parent's nightmare, because you go through... There are ways you can lock down your kid's phone. So our nearly 13-year-old has a phone, but there is a family kind of permission required for him to use that phone at certain times. And then you get sort of into the, does that include everything? I think my other half set it all up, but I can't quite remember what the process was. And there are many processes, and different phones have different requirements. But what I think we can all agree on is that you should be able to go, right, OK, you can never on this phone download TikTok or Twitter or Instagram or Snapchat, just the obvious ones. You just can't do it. It would be impossible. It's just a toggle switch. And if the person who's got that phone tries to untoggle it, then it will require a password or an email or double verification, all the usual, details that are required, but more than the usual detail. That would really simplify it. That way you haven't got rid of it as such. You can take your own choices. Maybe kids will find a way around that as well. That's also possible. But broadly speaking, it will be so much simpler than the kind of the sledgehammer approach that some people are criticising the government for. If you could just have a toggle switch that said off, and that could never be put back on without going through a basic process that would involve the parent. I think that might be a simpler answer. Thoughts on that? I am intrigued. We didn't really get into this yesterday. I'm intrigued about your experience. We talked about the policy yesterday. We didn't really talk about the cold face of the problem. So as parents, as a parent, what are the areas that concern you? What have been the areas where you've found your kid up at 2 o'clock in the morning, whether it's scrolling through TikTok, which seems to be the one in terms of just inane, incessant, delivered every few seconds videos, whether it's that? Is it what they're looking at that is the problem? And then you get into sort of porn sites as well. I mean, you've got to somehow be able to block all of this stuff. So that was partly addressed in previous legislation, but not fully. So I don't know how you're ever going to be able to cut out all the bad stuff for your kid. Your experience as a parent, 0344 499 1000. We're going to go back to toxicity in politics in a moment as well. But on that issue of social media, Arthur is in Cambridge. Arthur, what have you got for us? Hi.
Well, I don't think that it's necessarily a thing that the government needs to control. I don't think the government needs to step in to do these things. I think it's more of a parent's responsibility, because there are ways in which you can monitor your child's usage of the phone, and you can do that relatively effectively. And it's more important for a parent to be able to make that decision instead of a government stepping in to do that.
That makes sense, as long as the parent can... I mean, I was talking a second ago about the logistics of that. Yes, there are simple ways around it to a degree, but do you think maybe tech companies or phone manufacturers could make it easier?
I think that there are definitely ways that it can be made more robust, and that should be trying to ban. If they need create a more robust technology instead of simply banning the site, that would make more sense. Because if I said, car accidents happen, so no one can drive a car, it's pointless.
Agreed. Yes, we tend not to legislate on worst-case scenarios. Otherwise, everything, of course, would be banned. Arthur, thank you very much indeed. That's Arthur in Cambridge. I couldn't quite work out whether he was a 96-year-old professor or 15. 0344 499 1000. Leslie is in Glasgow. Leslie, what have you got for us? Back to that issue of social media. Your thoughts?
Hi, I'm opposed to the social media ban, not solely because it's a ban on children. However, it also restricts adults' ability to get on social media sites like YouTube. And as a content creator, this will damage my business. It damages business. Look at it like that way. My revenue accumulates based on the amount of views I get, the amount of likes I get, the amount of subscribers I get. If you need to provide someone with your credit card details or with facial recognition, that's going to put off a lot of people actually using.
So you're a YouTuber, are you, Leslie?
Yes, sadly I am. I don't know how I fell into that rabbit hole.
Well, no, I wouldn't say sadly. It depends. What sort of stuff do you do?
Well, I interview a lot of diplomats, intelligence people. Stuff on foreign affairs.
Yeah.
But also UFOs, that kind of stuff. A lot of different content.
What sort of... I'm only asking this because I'm genuine. What sort of following have you got?
Well, I'm on multiple platforms. It's not a big channel. I've only got something like 10,000 subscribers at this point. I actually only started the channel up in the last year and a half. So, you know, I'm enjoying doing it. However, I can see the trajectory. So I've gained across multiple platforms probably 20,000, 30,000 followers and subscribers.
Yeah, good.
So I have this aim to continue doing it and to increase the monetization. However, this will limit that. This will damage that trajectory by limiting the number of adults that will go on YouTube, because I know that a lot of my audience will not like providing the government with facial recognition.
But at the moment, I haven't got to provide that to YouTube in order to watch your stuff, Leslie, right?
Yes.
So is your concern then that there'll be tougher legislation coming round the corner?
Well, from what I heard, that once this is passed, that it will require facial recognition or providing your credit card information to actually log.
Well, for a kid, you'd have to have some kind of ID.
No, for an adult too. If you to differentiate between the children and the adults, you will either have to take a picture, an image of their face will have to go up, or you have to provide...
I've not even heard that. That I've got to provide ID to YouTube.
To just use YouTube as an adult, in about a year, you'll have to provide ID. So it will affect everyone.
Well, it would do if you're running a channel where you want to make some money out of it, yeah. I wasn't even aware that I would have to provide ID to anybody. Unless digital ID comes in for everything, then, of course, I might be asked.
Yeah, well, that's bringing in that slippery slope that they're going to ask for more information. But I don't even want to get into that. I'm looking at it from the perspective, the lens of someone who's a content creator. It's going to damage my business. And if you're just a YouTuber, if you just like to use social media, it's going to impair that, because, again, you're not... I know a lot of people that will not use YouTube if they have to provide their credit card information or their...
Well, I mean, you go through certain ID checks anyway on quite a lot of places, right? I mean, sometimes it is the click of, are you over 18? I understand that bit. But whether it will take every single stream, be it YouTube or TikTok, that's going to digitally ID me, I mean, you'd have to have the technology in place to begin with, wouldn't you?
Well, it won't affect me in the sense that they've already got my information, my credit card information, because as a YouTuber, as a content creator, YouTube has my information. So I'll be able to use YouTube no matter what.
Because they've got your details, yeah. I mean, my assumption is that YouTube probably already have something on me.
But if you don't, for example, if you don't have a YouTube Premium account, the chances are YouTube will not have any of your information.
Well, I did have a premium account and then ditched it because I thought I can withstand a couple of ads for some iffy air conditioning unit.
And that's the problem for individuals like myself. A lot of people are going to just ditch this and go, oh, do you know what, I don't want to hand over my information and I'm going to get less revenue. You know, I thought you wanted back business. Come on, social media.
No, I know. I get it. Listen, good luck with the channel, Leslie. I think it's great when people go there. I know how darn hard it is to create a YouTube channel from mates of mine that either do it or have done it. But fair play for giving it a go. And it doesn't help that it's not just the sort of ID thing that Leslie flagged there. But the likes of YouTube they'll often up the game. So you think, hey, I can make some money, and you've got to hit a lot of people, and they've got to listen or watch for a long time before you even make a bean. So sometimes things look really pretty good, and you think, wow, they're doing well, and they're making nothing, a couple of £100 a day or something, which or a week even, and then just when you think you've got there. The YouTube boys come along and go, yeah, we're upping you've got to get this amount now. So you're kind of always playing a sort of, almost kind of a video game in order to hit the next target to get paid for your content. But for those that succeed in it, it's brilliant. And what a great way to earn a living by doing something you are genuinely interested in. I mean, there's people that are making, we were just talking about it during the break. If you look at kids' stuff, you get families who just film themselves monkeying around being a family, got millions of followers. None of them have to work again. I mean, if you hit on it and you get the bullseye, you're there. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
I'm genuinely disgusted when people continue to point out failure after failure after failure and do not provide balanced analysis of the deliverable of services like the police. What I don't see from reform is them standing next to some of these people that they continually criticise and saying, actually, they've made a mistake here. There is a requirement for a review and we must get through it. But I'd also like to thank the police for doing an excellent job at stopping the riots, doing this, breaking this criminal gang, doing the hard work they do day in, day out. And I think we take it for granted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 2:25. I didn't know where I was going there for a split second. I think I was thinking of those aircon ads on YouTube. Tristan is in Bedford. Back to politics, Tristan. What have you got for us? Hi.
Hi, Ian. Great show.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say it is incredibly toxic. I mean, I've lost friends because I have shown support for reform. And these are people that I've been friends with in high school.
How is that even possible? You know, I mean, it's just reform. I mean, it's not like, you know, some bizarre extreme party.
Oh,
they just have
far right, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even. If you look at like reforms policies in lots of other areas, you'd be hard pushed to say there was anything far right about it. In fact, having control over immigration, I also would consider to be a pretty centrist position.
So yeah, it's common sense. I mean that's not the only reason that I'm supporting. Yeah. I have you know, I think their energy policy is what I want. I work in energy, and it's common sense. Having energy independence to me is common sense.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not just oh, you know, immigration, they do have other policies there if people look at the manifesto. But the thing is, a lot of people don't. They just sort of, you know, I hate saying left and right, but the left just think of immigration and they call you all sorts of names. The other thing is, you have to remember is when Donald Trump was, threatened and had the assassination attempt, and when Charlie Kirk was unfortunately assassinated, they were joyous in it. They celebrated it, and they filmed themselves celebrating it. Whereas,
I mean, it's so bizarre. Even Charlie Kirk, for God's sake. I mean, if you look, for those, you know, many people, as I'm sure you know, Tristan, had not even heard of Charlie Kirk until he was sadly assassinated. But for those of us that had followed his stuff for many years beforehand, I mean, I never remember watching Charlie Kirk going, oh, my God, he's an extremist. Not at all. I mean, that would be ridiculous.
But it's
I mean, there's a few of those American kind of extremists. There are many out there, but he wasn't one of them.
No, but the thing is, it's just a different opinion. If you have different opinions, you're looked at as in a totally different way. I mean, I suffer from Crohn's, and I'm having a few issues with my Crohn's at the moment. One of my friends I was talking to literally a couple of months ago, and he was saying, well, you do like Donald Trump, Chris. And I was like, well, I just favour him. You know, he's like, well, yeah, but maybe you having these problems with your Crohn's is, you know.
What, so Donald Trump gave you Crohn's disease? I mean, this is a...
No,
we're
having a flare-up at the moment. That is really pretty... And the thing is, I'm quite passive, so I just sort of laugh at, okay then. I don't really take it sort of seriously, but the thing is, people on the other side, they take it incredibly seriously. I mean, you must have saw the attack on young Bob. Yeah. You know, people are attacked. You know, I mean, that is how ridiculous.
I mean, that's the weird thing. There's the young Bob. Who's that other fella that goes around and, you know, he does create a bit of mischief on the streets and, you know, often.
There's Montgomery Toms. He's been attacked as well.
Yeah, Montgomery Toms. He got a pasting the other week, didn't he? There's been a few of those. But no, I was thinking of somebody else. But anyway, those kind of guys, because some people obviously out there on the streets of Manchester, London, wherever they go, recognise them and decide that, you know, they are not just somebody they disagree with, but somebody who deserves to be slapped and their equipment broken.
And it's the thing is that it's just a different opinion. It's you're having a different choice or a different you know, words than someone else. And that's the crazy thing. Whereas, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, you could have different opinions and just, you know, forget about it and move on. Whereas now, it's so heightened to a ridiculous situation. I mean, when we got the next general election, I dread to think how it's going to be, to be honest with you. Doesn't seem to seem a way to quell it, to be honest with you. I can't see a way to quell it because of, the left seem to be more, they're more happy to be violent. And the thing is, if the right and left, if the right went violent, then it'll be all over social media, it'll be all in the papers and everything like that.
Well, I think the right violence that we see, I'm not going to defend anything here, but I think it's different in this sense. If you look at the protests in Southampton that happened the other day, most of by far, 90-odd% of people that went there just peacefully protested. And then you get this small contingent of people that don't represent the right. They're just people that have usually got a criminal record as long as your arm. And they will turn up to any scrap if they think they can kick off and throw a rock at a copper's head. So they don't even represent the right. But they just turn up anyway. The people that are giving young Bob and co a kick in the camcorder are people that do represent the left. They would happily say, I am of the left, and that's why I'm attacking young Bob.
Yeah, and the thing is it comes down to, we've got trans, and the thing is you've got trans ideology and all these different ideologies, whereas on the right, I would always say it's common sense and logic and data, whereas on the left, it's more ideology.
I've always said it's...
You have to think back.
Yeah, you almost, if you want to be a left-wing, you've kind of got to tick some box, you've got to subscribe to something that you've consciously decided to believe, rather than on the right, where most, I think, of the ideology of the right is just instinctive. It's just in you as a human being. You don't have to join a sort of an opinion or a thought process to think it. It's just there in everyone.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think banning and restrictions with net zero. What does Ed Miliband want to do? He wants to ban and restrict everything, which obviously makes things more difficult for everyday people.
Indeed.
You know.
Listen, some great points there. Tristan, thank you. I hope the Crohn's deflares itself as well. Nothing to do with Donald Trump, but we live in times when anyone can be anxious and flare up for all manner of reasons. Tristan, thank you, mate, for that. Great call. 0344 499 1000. Lee in Bristol, just in terms of social media and phones, I have full control of my daughter's phone. When we were both on Android phones, I made the mistake of getting her an iPhone, and now the only control I have is when I take the phone off her and put up with the shouting until I give in. Yeah, and don't... and thank you, Lee, for that. When people say, well, it's just down to being a good parent, yes, of course, notionally we know that is true, but unless you've been screamed and shouted at for a long period of time, or even just relentlessly followed around the house saying, please, can you put the passcode in the TV so we can watch YouTube, or something like that, don't underestimate the level of toll that will take on working parents who've been hard at it all day long, trying to cook a dinner, trying to get stuff done, trying to pay bills, and you've got Pipsqueak McDougal nipping at your ankles saying, I just want to watch the telly. It really isn't just a case of saying, no, sorry, end of. It can be a bit more challenging than that. 0344 499 1000. Just gone 2:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
3. Jeff says, is there any reason why the parents that supply or purchase the phone for their kids can't, via the parents' request from the supplier, like Vodafone, to block apps until the child turns 16? They will have to supply the child's name and date of birth. Just a thought. Well, you get into also, the one thing that we found tricky was blocking the App Store. So you could block lots of apps, but then we discovered that they could just go to the App Store and re-download the app, because once it had been opened... Oh, that's right. It still appeared on your... You know, if you've got an iPhone and you look at your home screen and you flick across your screens, right at the end are apps that have been recently opened. So they can appear that it's a minefield. It should be a whole lot easier, you might have thought. Now, the Equality Act 2010 has reshaped British society, yet remarkably few politicians on either side have seriously questioned it. A new paper argues that the Act made an unprecedented shift from simply prohibiting discrimination to actively enforcing equality, creating in the process a system of what its authors call justified discrimination. What is going on here? Let's speak with Dr. Alka Singhal-Cuthbert, Director of Don't Divide Us and an academic who co-authored this report as well. Good to have you on with us again. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
So it's a pleasure. I mean, I sort of summed up some of it there at the intro. So Equality Act 2010, when something's called the Equality Act, there's nothing to not like, is there? It's like, wow, it's an Equality Act. It's like just saying, I'm a nice person. Everybody wants equality.
No, that's true, and but it's really important now more than ever that we just simply do not accept what is given to us at face value, that we start using our own critical thinking and looking at what is being said, look at the substance of it, which is what we've done with the Equality Act. This is not something that we've done lightly or quickly. It's the product of many years' work and looking at not just the law itself, but also how this is playing out throughout society with mums, teachers, councils. And of course, we've seen just in recent weeks the kind of more tragic consequences of this kind of thinking or unthinking, really. I would argue it's a way of inviting us all to outsource our moral thinking and sort of give it up to experts instead, really, and that's very dangerous.
Indeed. So justified discrimination, it will always be argued by some, well, it's not discrimination, it's actually about equality, and in fact I think they use the word equity as well, which of course is nuanced but important perhaps. But what's your overall take on this, Alka? Do you understand where it came from initially? Has it gone too far? What's the problem here?
I do understand how, on one level, it makes sense. It was certainly presented as a continuation of previous anti-discrimination legislation from the 60s, but they were things that were based on reality and concrete acts that prohibited concrete acts of discrimination, right? It's something that ordinary people understood and it was accepted, and it had limits as to its scope. The Equality Act uses a lot of the same language, but its whole intention was not to deal with discrimination. Its intention, it assumed, rather than assume that British society and British people are essentially okay, but there will be instances where things go wrong, where there are bad faith actors, where there are racists, and deal with them on an individual case. It assumed systematic racism.
Yeah.
And that means assuming British people are systematically racist, or will be, unless they get trained out of it. And the training out of it is, of course, it's an impossible utopian task.
Of course.
This is the political, ideological beliefs of multiculturalism that have been written into law, and through the law, extended throughout all our society, because every single public institution is beholden to it, and increasingly private bodies are too. So its scope is expansive.
Well, you're scared witless out of your own shoes, aren't you, as a corporation? Because once somebody starts putting in sort of certain words like discrimination, and you get into that kind of, certainly in the States, these kind of huge multi-million-dollar companies who purport to teach things like critical race theory, they'll knock on the door of a bank and say, hey, we can de-racist your staff. How about that? And of course, banks and institutions go, well, yeah, that's a great idea. We don't want racist staff around here. Come in. And somebody goes, well, actually, you haven't got any racist staff. They're all really nice people. Yeah, but just in case, we better get them in. So you end up in this turmoil, which is based on language. As I said at the very beginning, you mentioned the Equality Act. Nobody wants to argue against it when you see it written down like that.
Yeah, and it's really so important that we get, that there is greater public attention and scrutiny paid to how this is actually better named the Inequality Act. It literally says, this isn't even a question of interpretation, and it has actually been said by judges in tribunals, yes, this is a case of discrimination, but it is justified, right? So it is justifying discrimination. So rather than we are all held to an equal standard, and if we breach it, the same law will apply to us, instead, we are being called and described and invited to see ourselves and act as if we are not individuals under an equal standard, but we are bearers of some group vulnerability.
Indeed.
Group disadvantage that gives us the right to then claim special privileges or special exceptions from the law.
And of course, I was just going to say, when it comes to the workplace as well, it could be that you do employ, if you employed 5 members of staff and they were all brown or all white, that is possible without you being some kind of bigoted, discriminatory nut job. I mean, it might just be that you found 5 people who happen to be brown and are best at the job. You know, if I employ, as a fella I know that's really good at IT, happens to be of Indian descent, if I employed him and he said, I've got 4 mates who are also good, I said, well, bring them on then. That saves me the bother of having a look. I might end up with a workplace that's got 5 brown people in it. Does that mean I am breaching the Equality Act?
Well, you know, I mean, it could be construed as that. That's the point. The scope for individual common sense decision making, whether you're an employer hiring 2 people or 1,000 people, or whether you're an employee, the scope for individual decision making in hiring, firing, progression, or just in our everyday social interactions, who you invite out for an end of week drink, etc. You know, there have been cases brought where discrimination has been claimed because somebody hasn't been invited out to the pub on a Friday evening. Our society can't carry on under this kind of legislation. You know, it's not just a legal, you know, you say the law and people think, oh, it's a dry thing and it seems very removed from everyday life. But this is a very unique type of legislation. It was designed to change the culture.
Sure.
And it has done that.
There is at least one political party that are suggesting they will get rid of the Equality Act. I'm not suggesting you're endorsing that, but they have said out loud, of course, the minute they said it, everything that we've just been talking about happened. The world lost its mind and said, no, you can't do that. They want to remove rights of women. Well, of course, that isn't quite the same thing. You might intelligently want to say, well, we can get rid of it because we don't think it's working and doing what it should be doing, and we can replace it with something more logical. But it's a good example of how the world reacts when you get into this territory.
So it's really important. We're so glad that we've had endorsements from both Claire Coutinho from the Conservatives and Suella Braverman from Reform, both of whom have made very sensible responses to our report. It's really important that we understand that this, you know, it seems radical, right? You want to get rid of the Equality Act. Oh, my goodness, pearl clutching, you know, you want racists to run amok. As if I would want racists to run amok. Of course I don't. It's understanding that it's the Equality Act that is radical, right? That is the radical move that has tried to revolutionise our common sense understanding of what equality means, what fairness means, what tolerance means, right? And so actually getting rid of it, I mean, we give 3 options in our report, and it's not up to us to say which one. That will be, it should be a public discussion. I hope the public will get the chance at the next election to vote on that issue. I hope people have it in their manifesto. But I would say that getting rid of the Equality Act is essentially an act of restoration, right? It's not going to solve all our problems, but it is restoring us to a condition of individual freedom, innate equality and dignity that has been recognised for centuries in common law and canon law in Britain. And it will allow us to start speaking freely with each other and perhaps building up the social trust.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But of course, as I said, you know, the minute you say it, the first remark that comes back is, so you don't believe in equality. Now, obviously, I couldn't broadcast what I'd like to say to those people because it's such a stupid response. But it's the go-to response, isn't it? You don't believe in equality. Well, yes, I do. I just don't think this is the way to achieve it.
Yes. I mean, I think to anyone that says that to me, I say, look, you know, do you want people to being equal and being free doesn't mean that you never have any bad moments, right? That you never have any problems. Or do you want us all to be protected by the state and all its, you know, at-length proxies that shield us and keep us in a state of emotional, political and psychological infantilization? I don't want that. I don't think most people in Britain want that. I think we have, you know, and if we haven't, we need to find it rapidly, the self-confidence to say, you know, no, you know, there are, you know, Claire Coutinho said, and I thought it was a brilliant thing to say, in the wake of the tragedy of Henry Nowak, there are worse things than racism, right? There's murder, there's all sorts of things. I mean, racism is horrible, that's true, but to assume that we cannot deal with that me as a brown woman could not deal with a racist man saying something to me is to really belittle me, and to treat all white people as if they were potential racists like that. Just sort of all they need is a little nudge and they'll go off, unless they've done this, training with usually some banal 20-year-old straight out of some course that knows nothing.
And an iffy flip chart, which usually comes with the usually comes with the territory, and some very strange graphs as well. Listen, always good to have you on. Thank you for outlining, explaining that real common sense stuff from Dr. Alka Sengal-Cuthbert, director of Don't Divide Us, an academic as well who co-authored that report. She's really saying, get back to basics, get back to some common sense, restore sanity in this area. Thoughts on that? 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
I'm genuinely disgusted when people continue to point out failure after failure after failure and do not provide balanced analysis of the deliverable of services like the police. What I don't see from reform is them standing next to some of these people that they continually criticise and saying, actually, they've made a mistake here. There is a requirement for a review and we must get through it. But I'd also like to thank the police for doing an excellent job at stopping the riots, doing this, breaking this criminal gang, doing the hard work they do day in, day out. And I think we take it for granted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. Back to your calls. Kevin in North Yorkshire. Toxicity in conversation. What are you making of this, Kevin? Good afternoon.
Well, good afternoon, Ian. The good doctor actually touched on it. The point I wanted to make was it's all down to education, I think. It's down to the education system changing. And what you find now is a lot of the younger people just cannot hold an argument. They've got to have an opinion. And they know very little about anything other than ideology and what's been pumped into them from education. And the good doctor kind of touched on that. They don't know how to. They're infantilized. We're all being infantilized, but even them more so. They can't have an opinion without getting angry about it. Yeah. And I don't think it's basically social media that does it. I think that's a symptom of it, but I think it goes much deeper than that. It's down to the education system and the leftyization of it, and it's just got to a point now where these children are beyond help. I really do. I believe that they are beyond help. They're a generation lost, and I think it's going to take education to be taken back again, and education should be what it says on the tin: facts, mathematics, geography, history, and a generation born again.
Do you know what? That you've just raised something, and I can kick myself for not bringing this up at the beginning, because it's so relevant. We're in a world of opinions rather than a world of facts. Would that be fair?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly the point.
If you look at, we've been talking a lot about social media and these sort of big accounts, they're not news accounts. People like to think they're the news or they're the truth. And sometimes they will be. But generally speaking, they're opinions. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I think it's great that you have. But they should be taken as what they are, which is opinions and not facts.
You look at the people that have come through and since the 60s into every walk of life, but one of the major ones that has been taken down this path is the media. And it used to be you'd have a guy in a dinner suit read you the news and he'd tell you that a plane crashed in a certain place. And we don't know any more than that. When we know the facts, we will get back to you.
Yeah.
And it used to be that clipped.
That's not good enough. We saw this with the horrendous case of Henry Novak. We saw it with Henry Novak in different ways. But the case in Belfast, which we can't talk too much about because there's a court case obviously going to be happening. But a lot of media got completely destroyed or attempted to be destroyed because they weren't giving enough graphic details. And you think, but that's not the way news works.
No, well, the issue...
It's the way social media works, and some people would like their news like that. And that's, I guess, fine, but I don't.
Well, just before social media, of course, the news went 24 hours, didn't it? 24/7.
Yes.
And the problem was you have to fill the space with opinion, because once you've said some facts, you can't fill that space with anything other than opinion. Now, that's fine on a talk radio station, because that's what you're employed to do.
Of course it is.
If it's the news, if it's literally the news, then you just want the bare facts, and when we know something else, we will get back to you and report.
You don't want your newsreader to read out the story of someone's horrendous murder and then say afterwards, oh, and by the way, I think they probably did it. That would be a bit weird. And
that would also balance. That would also balance out it would balance out the social media, because what you would have is the rubbish coming out of opinion, and the news would say, well, actually, this is what happened. And
well, yes. There is that as well. But you do, certainly in this industry, I find myself increasingly aware that quite a lot of what they call mainstream media is changing. I mean, if you look, for example, at a programme like Panorama, which I think their next Panorama is on these people that set fire to some properties that... Have I got that right, Finn? Is that a Panorama thing, this Russian connection to Keir Starmer's properties? Panorama would never have done that kind... Well, they might have done that one, but they've done quite a lot about sort of vaping shops and stuff you wouldn't normally get, maybe, on Panorama. It would have been, not highbrow enough for them.
Well, equally as well. I mean, you look at the issue. One of the issues that people talk about regularly is the far right. I was a teenager in the 80s. We had far right, and we had the National Front. And nobody's seen the National Front for decades.
No.
And we've never had a far right party in this country in any form or shape. And yet now everything's far right, and that's because the ideology tells these children that it is, and the younger adults, that this is far right now, because they don't know any different.
No, that's very, very true, isn't it? And the education system has a lot to answer for on that one. Listen, I've got to move, Kevin, but great call. Thank you very much indeed for that, Kevin in North Yorkshire. Before we go any further, let's talk to Michael in a second. The Voice of Doom, it's a brand new mystery voice. Remember, you're looking for a politician, usually an MP or a politician somewhere along the line, left-wing or right-wing, dead or alive. Here's the question, and it's a tricky one. Who is this?
Any of the noble aspirations.
Well, let's hear that again.
Any of the noble aspirations.
And again.
Any of the noble aspirations.
Who's that, then? If you think you know, 87222. 87222 is the number. If we get a right answer, we will reveal it after the news. If not, it rolls over to tomorrow. 87222, if you know who this is.
Any of the noble aspirations.
Back to your calls. This is Michael in London. Michael, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Afternoon. I think that the real divide occurred once the EU referendum was called. So I, in good faith, thought we were just kind of there to decide on our constitutional arrangements and whether we were in or out the EU. But the the Remain side kind of saw us lots as all sorts of swivel-eyed loon and whatever name you can come up with.
Yeah,
and it's still going on.
Well, so Brexit was, I guess that would make sense.
It triggered them because we'd had kind of, in their view, kind of everything was settled. We had the human rights, ECHR, EU involvement, supranationalism, and kind of that upset the apple cart. And I mean, I don't know if you ever pay attention, but your former colleagues at the other place, there's one or two characters that still kind of harping on about it as if it kind of the referendum was just held yesterday.
Yes. Yeah, and the world has collapsed and fallen apart as a result.
It's more amusement now. I just listen to it.
It is, yeah, especially when that figure that gets wheeled out, which, depending on who you're listening to or reading about, can go between 1 billion and 500 trillion that apparently we're all losing every day as a result of Brexit. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. And you're right. I think that was a massive booster rocket in this debate about division. I wonder, though, if Brexit and social media meeting, is it that cost of living crisis, is that get thrown into it in terms of people's dispositions?
I think people kind of lump everything together, so maybe social media can be an echo chamber on either side.
True, but when we had a previous caller that was talking about, do we have to look, take all these things away for a second, Brexit, social media, is there something in the human condition that's happening in this era we're alive in now that is causing anger, and people find a way of, taking that anger and sticking a flag of that anger onto their chosen subject?
I mean, I think we're living in a much more unsettled period now, compared to generations that existed. So there's much more change in terms of kind of demographics and improvements and costs.
Yeah, you'd have thought by now at this stage in the 21st century it'd be the other way round, wouldn't you? That all the bad stuff's been settled, we've had all the rows, everyone knows where they're going, and we've come up with a template that makes sense. But you're right, it's kind of in that respect, that's not happened. It's gone utterly mad. Michael, I've got to move, but thank you. 0344 499 1000. Some really good calls on this. How has politics become so toxic? I mean, the Brexit point is a really good one, because I think that's just an irredeemable reality, that's naturally created an obvious, not just a bit of a division, but a flipping chasm, and caused all manner of rows. But there's much more going on. Opinion is everywhere. Maybe it's opinion in general, whether it's social media, whether it's even on a news website. We've got the voice of doom coming up. Who is this?
Any of the noble aspirations.
87222 if you think you know. Let's get the news now. 3 o'clock.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Afternoon indeed. Yeah, welcome back. 3 minutes after 3 o'clock. Yeah, loads to get through. We are talking, of course, 10 years on from the murder of Joe Cox. Warnings of death threats, mass abuse and poisoned political discourse is still creating a huge divide in the way we engage in politics. Are there other reasons why there is such a wedge between political views? When did your opponent become your mortal enemy? More on that. Great comments coming through from you as well. Also, the Prime Minister's social media ban, a lot of scrutiny here and a lot of criticism. It's faced immediate pushback from the likes of Apple and Google opposing this preferred age verification approach over privacy concerns, while the announcement has also been branded a bit of a rush job and platforms warn that teenagers will simply migrate to unregulated alternatives. You just know there's somebody out there right now cooking up a new app that they believe will galvanise and hoover up all those young teens that want to talk to each other without anyone telling them that they cannot. And the man who killed Henry Novak has had his sentence, 21-year sentence, referred to the Court of Appeal as duly unlenient. The body-worn footage, of course, of the teenager's final moments continues to spark outrage, rightly so, anger, rightly so, and even protest. Details to come on that. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk, 0344 499 1000. This comes in from Lash, who says, we are old-fashioned parents to 4 kids. We don't have a TV. The kids have phones only on the journeys to and from school. It's very hard entertaining 4 kids without screens, but we managed it. I'm not happy about the social media ban for a selfish reason. My kids currently have superpowers. They can play anywhere, making up games with a stick and a piece of fluff. They can talk to people. They don't grunt. They have opinions. They read books. My 12-year-old has the reading age of a 17-year-old. I don't want the social media ban, as when they get into the wider world, their superpowers won't be as remarkable, as lots more kids will turn out to be moderate human adults, not grunting hunchback screen addicts. I love that, Lash. That's amazing. If you can pull that one off with 4 kids and not a screen in the house. Is there a TV in the house? Is that what it says? We don't have a TV either. I think that's fantastic. If you can make that work, then I think all of us... all I know is my kids can have screens, but just not all the time. But when they do stuff, like when we go out, if we take the dog for a long walk in the woods or something, and they monkey around and climb trees and mess around and fall over in the mud and giggle, they might have a scrap halfway through it, but there is something far more fulfilling about your day, knowing your kids have been outside and doing, you know, the stuff that Enid Blyton wrote about, for God's sake. I know it romanticises it a bit, but you take the point. Now, as I mentioned, Henry Novak was 18 years old when he was repeatedly stabbed with a ceremonial knife by Vikram Digwa in Southampton. The case, of course, sparked protest and claims of two-tier policing, and now the Solicitor General has referred the 21-year sentence to the Court of Appeal for being too lenient. Let's speak with Chris Dorr, KC, barrister, writer and broadcaster. Afternoon to you, Chris. Now, look, I know you've got very set views on prison and whether you believe it to be the right approach, the wrong approach. I know sometimes you think it's the only approach as well. But where do you sit with this one? Because this was a barbaric act. I mean, all murders are. This was acute, it was horrendous, and of course, sadly, we saw the imagery of poor Henry dying on that body cam footage. 21 years was the sentence given. Could have been a longer sentence, and now the Solicitor General is looking to increase it. Your thoughts?
Well, my first thoughts, as always, when I'm dealing with a case of this kind, is for the victim and his family, Henry Novak and his family, who, of course, no matter what happens in the legal process, are not going to ever see him again. And that, I think, is something that all of us who have ever worked in murder trials, particularly when the victims are young people, we always pause and reflect on the fact that we are involved in a criminal process. There is a trial, there is a sentence, but none of it, doesn't matter what we do, none of it is going to bring the victim back. So the question then, if you can't do that, which is what, of course, everyone would wish very much to be able to do, if you can't do that, what do you do with a 23-year-old who's committed a crime like this? So at 23, not quite at the level of full adult maturity, psychologically, emotionally, and so forth. So the question is, 21 years, he's been an adult for 5 years, and you add on 21 years, that represents that will be 80% of his adult life at the point that he's eligible even to apply for parole. I think that's enough.
The Solicitor General getting into this now. I mean, what do you make of that? Of course, you know, it wouldn't be the first time we've heard government departments, you know, get animated about things and those sort of facets of the legal system that think that, you know, a case should be challenged or a sentence should be challenged. And in fact, you know, one I think can reasonably argue, Chris, even if you agree with the prison sentence, the principle of being able to challenge things is all part and parcel of our legal process, etc. In this particular case, what do you sense about this challenge?
Well, so the Attorney General and the Solicitor General, who are the law officers of the Crown, have always, or for very many years at least, have had the right to appeal against a sentence which they consider to be unduly lenient. And that doesn't mean just too low. It has to be so far off of the sentencing guidelines that the Court of Appeal thinks the judge has got it totally wrong. Now, how you can call 21 years as a minimum term, as I say, I repeat, he won't get out after that unless he's eligible for parole. He could be in for 25, 30, 35, or the rest of his life if he doesn't qualify for parole. So it's a minimum term. My concern, Ian, with this and a number of other cases recently, is that this is not the Attorney General acting as an independent law officer. It's the Attorney General acting as a political minister and someone who wants to kind of, appear tough on crime to the public. And really, that's not what the law officers are for. And that, for me, is why it's wrong. But in the end, as you say, the Court of Appeal will consider. My view is they are unlikely to interfere with this sentence. And if they do, it will be by a very small amount. So, as I say, my thoughts are first and foremost with Henry Novak's family. And once again, the legal system isn't going to sadly solve the problem of knife crime on our streets.
Can we not just make murder a mandatory life sentence, no parole?
Well, you could, and there are many parts of the world where that's the case, particularly the United States, where many states and at federal level, life without parole for murder, and indeed for many other crimes, is the norm. And we can have a society like that, and we would need not the roughly 90,000 prison places we have now, but probably more like 200,000 places. And if the taxpayers of this country are willing to pay for that, and that's what they want, then through the ballot box, they can vote for it.
Why would we need 200,000 places? Are there that many people that have committed murder that
No, it's not so much that. It's just that one assumes that that's not going to be the only change. If you're going to have life without parole for murder, the consequence, of course, is that every single murderer is going to be in for the rest of their lives. And the consequence for, say, an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old or a 23-year-old is here is that they may be in prison for 80 years. And 80 years in today's money costs £4 million. And, of course, over time will be much more than that. So that's why I'm saying if we want to do that, fine, but we're going to find £4 million to keep someone locked up till they're 100.
When we get... I'm looking at another case here, this horrendous case of the father, adoptive father, who murdered the baby that he was meant to be looking after. There is a case where the public outrage, for different reasons, but equally as valid and powerful as Henry's death and others. But of course, when it's a baby, we're talking about something resonates very differently with us. The vulnerability, the fact that the victim in this case, little Preston, there was never a possibility. There was no comeback. There's never a possibility that you could defend yourself. That is it. A case such as that, people look at a story that we're all familiar with. I'd never run over the details. I don't even want to read the details myself. I know you as a lawyer have to go over those details in lots of different cases over the course of your career. But when it comes to something like this, I mean, what is an adequate sentence for somebody who's committed a murder of this nature? I mean...
Well, an adequate sentence is one that protects the public from the person, and particularly protects children. So that will mean a lengthy period in prison. But it's also one which offers some degree of possibility of rehabilitation at some point, but only if the person is no longer a danger to the public. And people who kill babies, and you're right, Ian, I'm sad to say I've been involved in cases where I've had to look at photographs of toddlers' bodies that when they've been killed with cigarette burns and, you know, just extraordinary, graphic and horrible things, which I wish I'd never seen and stay in my mind for decades, if not even longer. But as lawyers, we can't act, and as judges and as sentencing judges and court of appeal judges, if we let our emotion dictate the outcome of a case or dictate the sentence, then really it's no longer justice. And so I say you have to look at protect the public first and foremost, particularly from murderers. But after that, you need to spend the minimum amount of money and the minimum amount of time to get that person through whatever it is that's caused them to be so awfully violent and to commit such terrible crimes, so that in some way, shape or form, if possible, they can rejoin society. And if you don't have that principle in the justice system, as I say, build your prisons, build 3, 4, 5 times as many as we have now, fill them with people, see what happens to society. And I'll tell you what happens, Ian, as we know from every other country that's done the same thing. Crime rates, murder rates, all of those things simply go up and up and up. They don't go down.
But you couldn't look at a story such as this, Chris, and say that is somebody who's got to go to jail surely for the rest of time. I mean, the unspeakable nature of these crimes, the torture, the sexual abuse.
No, because if that were the case...
You want to rehabilitate this man, Chris?
No, it's a principle, Ian. So let's think about it this way. By that definition, every act of sexual violence or even minor sexual touching of a child is so awful to the vast majority of us that find it so morally repugnant and so awful and so damaging to the child that if you follow the logic through, it doesn't matter whether you kill them or you don't kill them, all of those people should be locked away forever. And as I say, that's an argument you can make, but what you can't do is say, well, we're just a few people because they've been in the headlines and everyone's really angry about them, we'll lock them up forever. But the rest, actually, that people are not that interested in will kind of, well, we're not so bothered about that. That's why you have to be consistent, and that's why you have to do things for a reason. And the reason shouldn't just be gut feeling, anger, the desire for revenge, because that's the difference between a civilized society and an uncivilized society, so that we don't just act out of sort of a desire for revenge at all costs, no matter what. We act out of some degree of rational assessment of risk management and rehabilitation and the possibility, let's face it, of redemption, which exists for everyone. And if it exists in 5 years, it may not be for 30 years that it exists for some people. But when it comes, there has to be within our system the possibility of some sort of redemption, save for those who remain violent forever and can never be trusted in society. And I 100% agree that any such person has to remain behind bars.
So child murder, though, could be sort of separated in terms of its gravity due to the lack of defence that a victim was able to even go to, because they would have had none by dint of being a child. Would that not be? I mean, I've heard people make the case that paedophiles, or certainly paedophiles guilty of murder, would be when people talk about the death penalty, for example. I know we're not talking about that here, but that would be an example of where they would say, OK, we're not going to kill every murderer for the reasons you've just given about the fabric and the intelligence of our legal system. It's sometimes hard to digest that, but I hear what you're saying, Chris. But with cases such as this, why not go for the death penalty?
So defensive. So you just said because the victims are defenceless. Well, a 17-year-old may not be defenceless. An 85-year-old may be defenceless. The problem is, the minute you start creating some abstract reason why a particular category of case means that you have to have the death penalty or life without parole, is that I'll give you 57 other categories that pretty much roughly meet the same criteria. So you have to do it for them all. Otherwise, the whole principle, what difference does it make if a predatory paedophile abuses 20 kids or kills one? It makes no difference. The damage is extraordinary to all of those children. So you either choose that that's a crime as a society, which we vote, potentially a referendum. If that happens, so be it. But the consequence will not be lower crime. And that's where I don't argue these things because I have any affection for paedophiles, let alone child killers. Of course I don't. Nobody does. But I just look at the legal system and see it being driven so much by political and media narrative and not by a sense of any degree of pragmatism about how to reduce crime. Do we really want fewer Henry Novaks? Or do we just want to make more of them? Because the more we just do this whole crackdown, lock people up forever mentality, people will then have to kill their way out of being arrested. Because if they get arrested, they're going away forever. And that happens all the time. It happens in America all the time. People shoot their way. They kill police officers because they're going to get life without parole or the death penalty. So you get more and more and more violence and more victims.
Why would you become a murderer to go into jail?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Why would you become a murderer, Chris, to go? You're saying people are opting to go to jail?
No, I'm saying if someone's wanted for murder or robbery or one of the other many crimes in America which have a mandatory life sentence or a death penalty, people will kill police officers to avoid being arrested. They'll shoot them in the head because if they get arrested, it makes no difference whether they kill 2 police officers because they're going away forever anyway, or they're getting the death penalty anyway. So when someone, I've seen this in prison in this country, prisoners serving very long life sentences are willing to kill other prisoners, kill prison officers because they've got nothing left to live for. They've got no reason to behave themselves. They've got no reason to cooperate with anything because it's all been taken away. And if you want those people who are the most dangerous, the most violent, the most likely to kill, to become utterly kind of professionalised within the world of crime and potentially in prison for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, make it so. Make that happen. But it's not that any politician is being honest. They're not saying, if we double the sentences, if we send all of these people for life without parole, we're going to have lower crime. They're just saying the public want it, so we're going to do it. And that's where I'm sad to say that policy and the realities of how criminal justice really works are not aligned.
Chris, on that point, thank you, as ever. Chris Daw, KC, the barrister, writer and broadcaster. Look, the death penalty ain't coming back, but we are sort of taken down certain avenues where you can really see the arguments for it. Although, to be honest, I think the sort of counter to that, I know I'm a bit all over the place on this, because the case of baby Preston, who was tortured and sexually abused in his short life, is so distressing. It's so awful that the idea that a baby went through 4 months of consistent torture and abuse, it's too much for any of us to, nobody wants to dwell on that. And you're taken down that route of thinking, this person responsible should be taken out the back, Jamie Varley, and probably shot by instalments. And he might have, in his last moments, I know this sounds almost mafia-like, but maybe that's the bit the mafia had right, that you have to know what you've done wrong and feel it and sense it before the final moment. And it takes us there. And I don't want to be, I don't want us to act like animals, like the people responsible for their crimes. But there are certain crimes you look at and think, I don't know what kind of punishment beyond something horrific this man should go through. And the categoric denying of it, and, they set themselves up into a situation where they could find themselves adopting a baby, which clearly one would assume they had done solely for the purpose of abuse. And it was horrific. And hospitals, social workers, the usual story, I'm afraid. I look at that and I can see it. The only counter to that is that for somebody like Varley, this 37-year-old, I think he was a former teacher as well, wasn't he? Somebody like him, you could argue that he would probably prefer being put in an electric chair or a noose than the decades of prison that he's going to be given. That actually prison would be worse than the death penalty. There is that. Your thoughts, 0344 499 1000.
genuinely disgusted when people continue to point out failure after failure after failure and do not provide balanced analysis of the deliverable of services like the police. What I don't see from reform is them standing next to some of these people that they continually criticise and saying, actually, they've made a mistake here. There is a requirement for a review and we must get through it. But I'd also like to thank the police for doing an excellent job at stopping the riots, doing this, breaking this criminal gang, doing the hard work they do day in, day out. And I think we take it for granted.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, 0344 499 1000. Can we find out from him, when is the sentencing of this creature that killed his own, well, not his own baby, a baby that he'd adopted? That is likely to be, I would have thought, in the next couple of weeks. Richard says, capital punishment, you wouldn't need 200,000 prison places. You kind of do wonder about that side of it. I mean, the arguments about capital punishment seem to suggest that, you know, if you go to states where they have capital punishment, they have more murders in those states than they do. It's not a deterrent, is the point. And I'm sure it probably isn't a deterrent because no murderer worked on the basis that they might get caught. So I get that bit. I don't know whether it would create more murders because there's capital punishment. The example you heard that Chris Dorr gave. This person will be Varley, responsible for killing the baby. I'm not going to say his own son because it wasn't his own son. This animal had no emotional, biological or any connection to this poor baby whose circumstances in his very first days on this earth were not great. And he was premature, and, you know, the family background and the fact that he found himself here. And you just think, wow, I mean, that would be the only hope for a little life. Not that a baby would have been thinking this, being moved around and passed from pillar to post, and staying with grandmother, staying with foster carers, and then these adoptive parents. It's just horrific. Thursday is the sentencing. Thursday, so 2 days' time, we will go. I mean, he's going to go to jail for a long time, as will his partner as well, one would assume. This one from Dave, who's in Tenerife, where it's 38 degrees. Stop it. Says, with reference to the sentence for the murder of Henry Novak, I think the murderer stole about 70 years of Henry's life, his age minus life expectancy. So 70 years should be the sentence. Love the show. That's a really good way of looking at it. If that is I mean, Chris Dorr did make that comparison himself when he was talking about the perpetrator. I mean, it could go horribly wrong the other way, where you only serve about, a year. Someone's 90 or whatever. But you take the point. Ian's down in London. Ian, what have you got for us? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Hi.
Actually, it happens. It sort of slightly changed my thing with what you just said. Yeah, work out what the age of the baby was and give them life sentence that. But it still doesn't.
No.
Truthfully, the sentencing for the guy that was involved in poor Henry's murder, right, which we'll put as murder, is quite simple. That is political, that they want to extend it. But as Chris sort of put, that is the minimum that he should be getting. But I would think, quite simply, yeah, throw away the keys. With the adopted parents, no two ways about it. As Chris was saying about costs and everything else, yeah, death penalty. Because sooner or later, when he goes inside, somebody will get him. Like they got Ian Huntley, was it, with the Soho murders? And they killed him. And the other one from the pop group, that they also killed them. They will. But again, you're just giving it that somebody else is having to do what really the general public would want, is to cut the costs. Don't worry about it. The guy has really sort of been caught, and his partner should sort of maybe not get the death penalty, but also throw away the key. But then it's adding to the bills here.
Well, there's the other curious thing, isn't there? Because obviously we pay for this, and our emotional upset and anger, Ian, as you know, is not relevant to sentencing. And, you know, there's a bit of my intelligent brain that understands that, because if we jail people because of the emotional impact on everyone around them, including wider society, we'd have people going to jail for decades and decades for all manner of crimes that currently you don't even go to prison for. So I do get that, and you can't pick and choose and go, well, that one's worse than that. I understand it because I'm reasonably bright as you are. But I look at a story such as this and the animals that were responsible, and I just think, what do you do with people like this? I mean, the small amount of detail that I've had to read is so awful. I don't, but then this is not the first time we've heard it, Ian.
No, because it's, again, what's going to be the thing? That quite simply, you're going to have everybody blaming the social workers and everybody else. Maybe it will make the social workers, who also, they'll say, well, we don't get paid enough, we haven't got enough staff and everything else. Maybe it'll make them a little bit more conscious of what's going on. They'll say that quite simply, this guy's going to be killed. If you're not watching what's going on, possibly the baby will be killed, but also you maybe losing a life on somebody else's life is put onto your shoulders. It just goes across the board. It don't stop, as you say. Anybody in the jury that finds them guilty will also think, yeah, this is going to be. But I bet you, if they find them guilty, they feel sure they deserve it. If they know that that person is going to be punished in that way, in these sort of cases, if it's something where there's even the slightest doubt they actually did it, then no. But if it's 100% that it is that way, yeah.
I hear you. Ian, thank you for that. This came in early doors, actually, from Paul in Fife, but I wanted to wait until it was relevant to read this out. He says, Ian, I'm not homophobic, and indeed I have a few friends who are gay. They are all good people, simply have different sexual preferences. However, the idea that two gay men can be given a little baby so they can play at being mummy and daddy in their sick fantasy world sickens me, and indeed is bizarre even to my gay friends. The latest horror story of little Preston Davey is not an isolated one. There have been numerous equally abhorrent examples in recent years where two gay men have carried out sick sexual acts, violence and murder to a child in their care. The social services, the NHS, the adoption agencies all have little Preston's agonising life and death on their hands. It's another example of people running scared from being branded homophobic. We are living in a dystopian horror show. Two men, either gay or straight, should never be given a little baby to bring up. It is simply wrong, says Paul. It's interesting, this one, because... And it's funny how I heard somebody interviewed this morning who was challenged on this very point. Were eyes taken off the ball here because either medical staff or social workers didn't want to be seen as homophobic, or better not mention this? I think this is reasonable. I think when it comes to adoption, and there are, and this has to, I have to say it out loud because just in case anything is misinterpreted here, there are, in fact, at my little boy's school, there are, I think there's two different families, possibly one with two mums, but definitely one with two dads, and who've just done the most incredible job with two brothers who have been through just the worst kind of hell in their previous life. And they have worked so hard through trying to rehabilitate and, get things back to normal and just give a semblance of safety and security and consistency to these young kids. And you look at that and think, wow, I mean, there's a great example. But I get where Paul's coming from. So let's make it more digestible so that it doesn't get translated as being something else being said here, like homophobia. Let's take two straight guys who are mates and they live together. And you could even argue this with a single person as well. When it comes to adoption, it's one of the few, if the only area of life really, where you get to literally select parents and authorities, because a child has, for whatever reason, has been put in a situation where they need adopting. Wouldn't it be the most obvious thing in the world, given you've got a clean sheet of paper, on balance, somebody goes, right, you've got a choice here. You've got two mums, two dads, a mum and dad, or a single person. What of those scenarios is probably, and bearing in mind sometimes things can go wrong, which of those models is the best shot that you could give to that child? So all equally nice people, all equally professional, responsible, and desperate to adopt a child. Which of those models would come top of the list? Is it too much to suggest that maybe a mum and a dad might be top of the list for reasons I don't need to insult your intelligence, I don't even need to go through? A mum and a dad, how life is formed and stuff. Female, male, paternal, maternal influence, all of that. Is that weird to suggest that maybe of those 4 or 5 scenarios, maybe the mum and dad were the one, in that particular example, that you would always gravitate towards? It doesn't mean you think bad of the single person who wants to adopt, or the two mums or the two dads. But on balance, given all things considered, a mum and a dad, best influence, best model we know, not always perfect. All these things can go horribly wrong, not for reasons that we're talking about here, but for different reasons. People can split, they can get divorced, we get that. But overall, why is that odd to suggest that I once said this on a BBC interview on Stephen Nolan's show a few years ago, and I was on there with Owen Jones, and he suggested that I was homophobic for making that point. And no, it's typical BBC. I wasn't bothered about this bit, but they did it anyway. Nolan had to give an apology to me, even though I was there in the interview, and clarify that I didn't say anything homophobic. I didn't say anything derogatory about gay people. I didn't suggest it wasn't possible for gay, bi, single people to bring up a child. That's obvious. Of course there are examples. I just gave one at my own kid's school. My point was the same then as it is now. On balance, is that not the more obvious option? It doesn't mean that, and we've seen, sadly, cases where terrible things have happened, even with mum and dad scenario. We know that. But on balance, 0344 499 1000. 25 to 4, this is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just before we talked to Kelly, Voice of Doom, before the news, we played you the new, it was day one, brand new mystery voice on a lighter note of all the kind of tricky news that's out there. So very simply, you're looking for a politician. Here was the voice we played you.
Any of the noble aspirations.
Who is that? Simple question. These are some of the guesses. You might have guessed it's probably a North American voice. Al Gore, Mitt Romney, Robert Reich, J.D. Vance, John Biffin. No. John Biffin was British, right? Eldon Griffiths, Anthony Blinken, Marco Rubio, Jimmy Carter, Dick Cheney, Mark Carney, Mitch McConnell, Richard Nixon. No. Can we hear it again?
Any of the noble aspirations.
Jacob Rees-Mogg. Of course it's not Jacob Rees-Mogg. We did not get a correct answer. Quite a tricky one. It rolls over to tomorrow, right here on Talk. Kelly is in Gloucestershire. What have you got for us, Kelly? Good afternoon.
Hiya. So, 3 points really that I wanted to make. Firstly, I honestly don't think the two guys are going to be in prison very long before they get the death penalty anyway, through means of other prisoners. But we'll watch that space. The second thing is I haven't seen anything on the news. You might be able to correct me, but I haven't seen anything that tells me this teacher, I mean, what was he? A primary school teacher, a nursery school teacher, a secondary teacher?
A high school teacher, so secondary school teacher.
Right, OK. Yeah, well, that's worrying, isn't it? For anyone
well, yes, the idea that this person was anywhere near kids is horrific.
Yeah, and then thirdly, these woke social workers and nurses and doctors and stuff like that are scared to say anything, through fear of being racist or homophobic or whatever. They need to be held accountable because they need to be scared if they don't say anything, not scared if they do. And the only way they're going to be scared if they don't say anything is if they get, if they get punished for not saying anything in the first place.
It's fair, yeah. I don't know what you do in terms of, because I can see why we would want to send these people to jail for the rest of their life. But then I guess the legal arguments on this, Kelly, is what happens when somebody is convicted of doing this to more than one child? So their sentence you'd think would be then greater than this case. But of course it couldn't be if you already have given the biggest sentence you can. I know that's not quite how it works, but you take my point.
Yeah.
You have to then change the way you gauge all the other sentences.
Yeah. Yeah, in that instance, but what about these people that didn't do anything, that saw this poor baby, and had a little feeling in the back of their head, oh, should I say anything, and didn't? I think, and I don't know what happens. So as far as I remember, and I don't want to dwell on it because I found it too upsetting to read the details, but the first visit to hospital, I think the medical people did contact social services to suggest or to say that this is a baby with injuries, and then it was looked into and, nothing to see here kind of thing. Yeah.
On one occasion, the baby had I think it was there were 3 or 4 visits to hospital, which, after the second one, you'd have thought, hang on a second, I mean, there's something going on here. They had a video, apparently, of the little Preston pulling a toy box on top of him, which they said, that's how he injured his arm or something of that nature. But the details of what this man was convicted of are obviously not just physical violence, but sexual. And I don't even want to mention what they are because they're so awful.
Yeah, I know. But these nothing to see here social workers, they've got... I'm not, I don't want them chucked in prison or whatever, but they've got to be chucked out the job. They're not fit to do the job that they're employed and paid to do if they've got that attitude of nothing to see here because 2 gay men have adopted a baby and they're scared of being accused of being woke. I mean, they are dangerous. They're just as dangerous.
It's quite extraordinary, the story. And I don't know if you saw the background of Preston's mother, who herself is a murderer. And you think, you start thinking about, is there a God? This little being was born into life by someone who'd committed a terrible murder, torturing a pensioner, a 71-year-old, to death when she was 14.
Yeah.
So she goes to jail for that. Her baby is then given to the grandmother, and the grandmother apparently has some cancer diagnosis and can't look after the baby, although the grandmother looks about 20. And then poor little Preston is given to these killers, or in one case responsible. I don't think I can really libel, can I, somebody involved. I don't know I'm going to get sued for calling the other one a killer as well, but allowing the death of. And you just think, what sort of world are we in when this was this poor 13-month-old's journey from being born to a killer and then eventually losing his life to two other killers? I mean, you couldn't.
Makes you want to cry, doesn't it?
It's just horrific. It's just horrific. Yeah. Kelly, thank you for that. Kelly in Gloucestershire. I don't even know what you. I mean, these are just the facts of the case. I don't know what you do with those facts, but when you start to digest the unbelievable nature of one 13-year-old boy's journey, it is just so tragic. Was there ever a point in his short life where he was able to sleep nicely and wake up giggling and laughing without something horrendous happening to him? 0344 499 1000. One here very quickly. Collins, Charlie mentions, this is Charlie Rowley. Charlie mentions that popular online accounts offer no solutions. I disagree. We've tried voting. It doesn't work. We've removed political parties. It doesn't work. It's not our job to offer solutions. That's for those we elect who go on to ignore us. Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of online content does say, oh, this is the solution. Yeah, of course it does. But broadly speaking, they're opinion pieces, and they are unqualified views, which is fine. My view when I talk about the law is unqualified. I'm just a bloke with an opinion. But we should distinguish between opinion and news. That's, I think, was the wider point. But thank you for that. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
I'm genuinely disgusted when people continue to point out failure after failure after failure and do not provide balanced analysis of the deliverable of services like the police. What I don't see from reform is them standing next to some of these people that they continually criticise and saying, actually, they've made a mistake here. There is a requirement for a review and we must get through it. But I'd also like to thank the police for doing an excellent job at stopping the riots, doing this, breaking this criminal gang, doing the hard work they do day in, day out. And I think we take it for granted.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk, 0344 499 1000. Now, with Britain's welfare bill spiralling out of control, the Conservatives are promising a review of sickness and disability benefits, with personal independence payments, PIP, sitting in the crosshairs. £23 billion worth of cuts are on the table, and those proposals are due in the autumn. Let's speak with Helen Whately, MP, the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary. Helen, good afternoon to you. We know that the welfare bill is unsustainable. There's not a person in the land with a straight face that could disagree with that statement. But where you choose to cut has always been the controversial area. So what have the Tories, what have your party come up with that is different and, without being unkind to anybody, is going to work?
So yes, last year at our party conference we announced £23 billion worth of savings from the welfare bill. That included stopping people getting benefits for lower level mental health conditions and stopping giving benefits to foreign residents. Today I've announced a review of the sickness benefit system, because the sickness benefit system is broken. Since the pandemic, we've seen a doubling of the number of people on personal independence payments. That's the main sickness benefit. And this area of benefits is costing us more money every year. It's now costing us £55 billion. So this has to change. Now, I recognise that making savings from sickness benefits is hard to do, and you've got to make sure that the support is there for those who really need it. But I am determined to fix a system that currently isn't working. It isn't working for people who are disabled, and it's also not working for the taxpayer.
Obviously, it's very difficult right now to give a specific example of where the axe falls, as it were. But you can already hear people saying, "Hang on a second, how are you going to decide? Why is it for the Conservatives to decide that I'm not ill enough to be given a benefit, which, by the way, I've worked X amount of years for, I've paid into the system? How are you going to define who gets it, who doesn't? What does that process look like?"
So what our review is going to do is it's firstly going to look at who should be getting sickness benefits, what sort of disabilities, sickness, what sort of needs people have, and how do you better assess people for that. One of the big things that has gone wrong with our system is a shift away from face-to-face assessments to letting a lot of the assessments happen over the phone, and that's a huge part of the problem. So we need to assess people better who really needs help. Then we need to look at what help they need. At the moment, the help is mainly cash going out to people. Well, actually, there's a really strong argument that cash isn't always the answer. Often it could be treatment, it could be support, it could be something different. So let's look at what support people should be receiving. And then thirdly, it's how do we make sure we actually get this money, this budget, under control. This bill has been going up and up and up, and actually we should be properly holding people to account and have proper controls over how much money is being spent.
Is there any data that you came across, Helen, when looking at this? We know that PIP alone, spending has doubled in around about sort of just over half a decade, which is just extraordinary. Have we just got iller or sicker in some shape or form, physically, psychologically, whatever? Or is something else going on here? What is the Conservative assessment of that rather disturbing figure?
So we do have more people talking about struggling with their mental health, more young people particularly, and far more people receiving diagnoses for neurodiversity, for instance, for ADHD, although in general the evidence is there hasn't been a significant increase in sickness in our society. Certainly nothing like the doubling of claims that we're seeing for personal independence payments, and nothing like the extent to which the sickness benefit bill has gone up. So the explanation isn't that society is getting sicker, it says something wrong with our system. One of the problems with our system is it does actively discourage people from working. So for instance, with this PIP payments, although in theory you can and should be able to work when you're getting it, in practice people who are on it really worry that if they work they're going to lose that benefit. So that's actively discouraging people from working and meaning that they're reliant on welfare for their income. That is not the right answer. Not the right answer for those individuals and not the right answer for the taxpayer.
Finally, what do you say to Pat McFadden, Labour's Pat McFadden, who said, hang on a second, Conservatives, what are you doing here? In the last year of the Conservative government, you hiked welfare payments by 33 billion quid. Who are you guys to give financial advice in this area?
So what happened when we were in government is when we took over from Labour in the 2010s, we brought the welfare bill down year on year on year. That was particularly the introduction of universal credit. Lots more people went off welfare and into work. Then what we've seen is through to the pandemic and, yes, through to the election, the bills started going up. Huge increase in claims for sickness benefits, particularly this increase in mental health. And in fact, if you say to Pat McFadden, how come Labour came into power? This was going on with no plan whatsoever to do anything about it. That's one reason why I'm working on a plan now. Now, the fact is this stuff is hard and it's not necessarily popular. I mean, MPs worry about the fact that they will get criticised for seeming not to care about disabled people. Actually, you know, I do. If you care about disabled people, that's why we've got to reform our system so it works better for them and so it's fair and supported by the taxpayer too.
Helen, thank you for your time. Helen Whately, MP, Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary. That's what the Conservatives are proposing. I do wonder, and I say this not to make a political point in favour or against any party, but objectively, it's quite hard, isn't it, for every time I interview a Conservative MP, it's very hard to sort of take seriously at this stage. Maybe in a couple of years' time it will change. I think we're still in the turmoil of the last Conservative government. I'm not going to say the last 14 years, because nobody was up making that point up until, well, up until the last election. Everything was the last 14 years. The last 14 years included all sorts of things, from COVID to Brexit and God knows what else, and a coalition government thrown in as well. But it's really hard to take the Tories seriously, and I don't mean that mischievously, when you know, they were the people there. The bill did hike up. Channel crossings began and went through the roof. We had waiting lists spiralling in the NHS, and these are just the obvious things. There's loads more as well. There was no sense in those the fag end of the Tory government, that things were ever tickety-boo. That was Helen Whately, the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary. Back to social media. Carl is in Coventry. What have you got for us, Carl? Afternoon.
Afternoon. Yeah, I was listening earlier on, and you were on about that they should have controls at the internet routers. But many Wi-Fi internet routers already come with parental controls on them, and you either have to activate them or turn them off. The problem is, if you want to turn them off to view something for yourself as an adult, then it can't differentiate between yourself and a child.
Well, that's true. And, of course, it only works for the kid if they're in the house.
Yeah.
Once you go somewhere else, you've got your phone and you can 5G your way to doom and gloom.
Yep, but the problem with the phones is that there's too many parents now where they've let the kids have the phones at a too young an age, and they can't take the phones off them anymore, and the parents have got no control over the children. If they try and take that phone off the child get, you know, violent, confrontational.
It's really tricky, isn't it? Because the phone does become a sort of a bit of a babysitter. You go around the supermarket and there's, you know, a kid sitting in a pushchair who's about 1.5 with an iPhone in their hand watching Peppa Pig or something.
Definitely. I've experienced it myself. My child, until she got to senior school, was perfectly normal, happy, used to talk to me and do things as a family. Got a phone, went to senior school, and then, cut a long story short, she's tried to commit suicide 3 times. And it's all because of bullying and pressure, all down to social media. And I so regret ever giving her a phone. And luckily she's left school now. She's happy. She's got a job. And she's moved away from that and grown up. But it's just been hell.
That period,
bullying.
I mean, I don't think you can blame yourself in that. Right? Of course you would. I get it as a father. Of course you would feel like that. But you know, there was always going to be a point when, because of the age we're living in, when your child is going to get a screen of some sort. I mean, they do homework on the things now, for goodness sake. So, you know, they were always going to get that. And if every single kid in your class has got a phone, then, and really got a phone, not rather than when, you know, your child makes something up that I'm the only person that hasn't. I mean, but, you know, literally every kid has got one. It's very hard to not give them one.
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with generally, in principle, banning things from a government perspective.
Agreed.
I just think it's not a good thing. But I do think the trouble that it's caused during school hours, teachers trying to teach and kids are texting each other and all that sort of stuff, I think there should be a a set time limit. So between sort of 6 and 8 o'clock, you can access social media, and that's it. So the child's got time to come home, do homework, have their dinner. Then when they've got their own free time, they can go on it for an hour or two, and then it's cut off.
Yeah, it's trying to get that negotiation and get... Because, I mean, you're absolutely right. And, of course, they would. If I said to my boy, Carl, you can game all night, he would game all night.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. I mean, you literally... There would be no going to bed. There'd be no going to sleep. He would carry on. If I said you can sit and watch YouTube for the next 10 hours... he would take all 10. He wouldn't say, oh, I'll just have half an hour and then I'll do some Lego. That ain't going to happen, right?
Yeah, definitely not, no.
Listen, Carl, you speak common sense, and I'm glad things have worked out for you, but what an experience to go through. Carl in Coventry, he's just one of many parents. The level of frustration on the... Because it doesn't happen, as I said, yes, it doesn't happen with anything else. Nobody says it about, my kid can't stop playing Monopoly. That never happened. My kid can't stop building Lego. They might love it and do lots of it, but there's no sort of addiction element to it. Just a reminder as well, with the World Cup in full swing, and boy, it is in full swing. Yeah, what happened to Spain, for goodness sake? A draw with Cape Verde, goodness me. Anyway, with the World Cup in full swing, talkSPORT and Meantime have teamed up to create So Good Lager, which will be poured from all O'Neill's pubs and some of the best sports bars across the UK. Find out your nearest pub. talksport.com/so-good. 18 plus, please drink responsibly. A man who knows all about iffy...
Drinking responsibly? No, I don't. That's my problem.
That's the problem. I was going to say iffy football results. Is our own Fulham
iffy football results, to being a Fulham fan, yeah. One guy put $1 million on Spain winning. It's very low odds, but he thought $1 million, I'll still get 50 grand.
Against Cape Verde.
He lost $1 million.
Oh, man.
Amazing story. Amazing story.